spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
Ooh, it's a little. I don't mind this angle. This angle is kind of interesting. I guess I should flip a little bit more towards here, though. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Without a Country. I am your host, Corinne Fisher. Remember that mostly the voices we're listening to in podcasting and live streaming, especially politically, are male voices. So thank you so much for being here. We'll get into that ad nauseum this week, especially with that New York Times article about Andrew Schultz being the most prominent voice in political podcasting, which, again, we are friends. I like him on a personal level. I certainly do not stand by many things he says or his endorsement of Eric Adams for mayor, who, this week as the mayoral primaries are going on in New York City, is making videos telling New Yorkers to drink a glass of water. So that's just what we're dealing with here in New York City. Welcome. A day for celebration. Andrew Cuomo has been defeated. It feels like when you get to the last level in Mega Man, which is a very millennial reference. It's a video game I played as a child on Nintendo with my dad. But it really does feel like we defeated some kind of a supervillain or comic book villain. And I will say one positive thing about Andrew Cuomo, and that is that the most likable he was throughout the entire election was when he conceded. And it is still unclear whether that was just a concession for the primary or a concession for the entire race. No one's really sure, including his own fans and donors. He said something really vague about going to look at the numbers over the next 2 weeks. It takes some time to figure out the numbers and for the Board of Elections to, they take a really long time for everything because they're incompetent. But the Board of Elections has to, get it posted out and make tallies by hand or whatever the fuck they're doing over there. The most disorganized place on the planet. And so it'll take him a little time to get information regarding, what his numbers actually were. But congratulations to Zohran Mamdani. Please, it drove me crazy last night because even at his own celebratory party, Tish James is saying his name wrong, and it's I can neither of the I was gonna say I could understand saying Zoran wrong, but honestly, neither of the names are hard to say. I guess Mamdani, when you say it fast, can become a tongue twister, but everyone is saying Mamdani and it just is annoying as someone whose name is always pronounced wrong. And it's one of those things where I do feel like white people have a weaponized incompetence when it comes to pronouncing names that are not American. This is something I've spoken about before. It annoyed me. I've had friends over the years who would give me their American names, and it always frustrated me that they felt the need to have an American name because we're too fucking incompetent here in America to pronounce a name that we haven't heard before. It's just like learning a new word. You can learn a new name and not be so culturally insensitive. This is something that has bothered me for ages. And so, no matter what you think of the guy, if you want to criticize him for his policies, which again, I'm 44. I took the Gothamist test. I'm 44% aligned with Zoran. I just learn how to pronounce his name correctly. At the very least, it weakens your argument and makes you sound stupid when you're calling him people are calling him Zohan, the movie. It's just hack and stupid. And if you want to criticize someone, at least say their name correctly if you're trying to be taken seriously. Again, it's not a difficult name to say. And I certainly struggle through names. So if you are authentically struggling through the name, learn how to say it because you're going to be hearing it a lot. And again, this was not like he was not my favorite candidate out of all the candidates, but he ran the best campaign, and there's no disputing that. He ran the best campaign. He ran a campaign that was energizing, was inspiring, and was quite frankly a masterclass for the Democratic Party in what people want to see and what is going to get people to the polls. And I think he really healed a lot of apathy, especially amongst young people who are left-leaning. And for that, he must be applauded. Truly ran the campaign of a lifetime, and in 9 months, no less. This is a campaign that started in October, which to go from polling at 1%, which is what he was polling, 4 months ago, to beating a legacy name like Andrew Cuomo is truly something incredible, and him and his team should be incredibly proud of themselves. It was a race well done, and a race that I feel very lucky to have been a part of. I mean, I guess luck isn't the right word because I, filled out the application and did it myself. So it wasn't luck, but I guess it was lucky that I chose this one. And so, moving forward, we'll see if Andrew Cuomo runs. I certainly, unless something wild changes, will be, in his policy, or, he still has lots of time to make a mistake. It was actually interesting because I was waiting for him to make a mistake like Andrew Yang had, like a stupid little mistake, about the saying something wrong about the subway or something. I was waiting for him to make a Andrew Yang-like mistake in his campaign, and he didn't. Besides the missteps that, and these aren't missteps. I was going to say besides the missteps he made with the Jewish community. Those weren't missteps because I don't believe he misspoke in any of those instances. I believe that's how he really feels. And that can certainly be a cause for concern. And I think, Zohran definitely needs to prove, as he said in his speech last night, that he is a mayor for everyone. He says he's a mayor for everyone. And I think, we should believe him until he gives us a reason that, he isn't. But I think in doing so, he really needs to prove himself and gain the trust of the Jewish community. And I think that, and also he needs to really work on his relationship with Black voters, which is something that almost every Democrat fails at. I mean, I don't think we've seen anyone succeed with Black voters except for Barack Obama. And it's disheartening that it takes a Black candidate to earn the trust of Black voters, but it makes sense historically with how Black people have been treated in America. And when you look at the map for who voted, in which way, the Bronx still went to Cuomo. And one thing that I heard a lot through my campaign was that the Bronx is a borough that continuously feels overlooked. And unfortunately, I had to end my campaign early because fuck the Board of Elections and their extreme corruption, which has, is something that has been validated behind the scenes for me with so many political insiders, so many people being like, they do this every time, they gatekeep. And again, if you look in your voter guide, it's not only me who appears in there who was not on the ballot. There are several other mayoral candidates who did the work, submitted the petitions, and who are not on that ballot, or who were not on that ballot. And again, those are people who don't have the money and platform to speak out, but I do, and I will continue to do so. But I wanted to, before I started handling that and whatever I'm going to do in getting the word out about the corruption, and I think someone like Zohran winning the primary is great for that. It's great to show that we're not really so concerned with someone having a ton of experience. And as I've said so many times before, to me, when you say I want someone with experience, to me what that means, especially now having spent time in politics, that just means you know people to make backhanded deals in a bubble behind the scenes without help from or say from constituents. That's all experience means. There's when we're talking about what is politics? It's advocating for people, knowing how to get things done, and then a lot of inside relationships. The inside relationships is not a good thing in most cases, and those other two things is anything that a smart and charismatic person knows how to do. And again, no matter what you think of Zohran's policies, he is both a smart and charismatic person. That goes without saying. Is some of the charisma produced through Instagram stuff? Yes. I would say, like, in person, he wasn't as charismatic as I hoped he would be. But again, most people aren't going to meet him in person. And if they do, it's for 3 seconds. He's certainly likable in person. He's certainly cordial in person. He certainly feels like he's listening to you in person, which I can't say for, many of the other candidates. I do feel that Michael Blake was also extremely sincere, although a little bit more serious than Zohran. But I mean, that's also an age different thing. Young people are just kind of a little bit less serious because life hasn't punched us in the nuts yet, life's punched me in the nuts. I'm not young, but I mean, Zohran and I are 6 years apart. And if we want to get woo-woo, the fact that Zohran, and I looked this up ages ago and I couldn't talk about it, but the fact that he's a Libra, I do find comfort in that because Libras, it is in our nature to be fair. So if you have concerns about his, again, stuff that in my opinion, shouldn't have even come up. I knew since January that this mayoral election was going to turn into just a freaking election about Israel and Palestine, which, number one, is not what the election is about. And number two, sucks in a city where we have an affordable housing crisis, in a city where we have a mental health crisis, in a city where people can't afford to stay in the city in which they were born. And I know Zohran's platform, was based on affordability, but so much of the conversation turned into Israel versus Palestine. And while I do want to blame that sometimes on the questions that he was asked, you can't blame it totally on the questions that were asked when Zohran is a man who, his entire adult life has been doing activism work for Free Palestine. And that's fine. I have no problem with whatever your political passion is. I think that's great. My point is that, obviously it is going to make the second largest Jewish population after Israel, which is New York City, feel uncomfortable. And it does also bring up the question, if that is your main passion, and I've talked about this before, if that's your main passion, why are you then going for a municipal office? And I think these are questions that, if his campaign team is smart, as they have proven to be so far, should be answered in this next portion of the election as we go into the general. We don't know if Cuomo's running, and we certainly don't want Eric Adams again, because I know often people vote in a way where the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know, which would mean reelecting Eric Adams. And I really disagree with that sentiment. I would rather try someone new like Zohran and be possibly disappointed or possibly, surprised, pleasantly surprised. What I do know, though, is he's a hard worker. He is cordial in all his interactions. He's enthusiastic. And again, he created a campaign that was truly historic. And he must be congratulated for that. The whole team must be congratulated for that. It's going to be interesting because I think a lot more people are going to be running for office now. It already happened after Trump was reelected. And, they're going to say, like, this is the Zohran template. But please know, the Zohran template was also the AOC template. I was actually studying Zohran's campaign a lot because I was so impressed by it. Really incredible what he did, the amount of volunteers he got on the ground. He had volunteers traveling in from all over the country to canvass for him. And that is really something, I don't love calling things a movement. It does feel culty to me. To me, there were many parts of his campaign that did give me the feeling of just like the leftist version of MAGA. And I know people will say, well, it wasn't MAGA because we're doing good. All right, well, that's where you're going to lose people who are a little bit more in the middle that we want to gain, right? But yeah, many of the artists who worked on his posters and his graphics and stuff, look in their bios on Instagram and it will say previously worked or currently work for AOC. So again, while this is not, completely it's grassroots in that it was individual people donating, not super PACs and stuff. It is not completely grassroots in that the DSA was backing him. And I say that not to take away from his campaign, but just to be really clear with anyone who's watching who wants to run for office themselves. It is, while I would never discourage you from running for something. You should run for something, but I just want you to know that, you can't put a couple Instagram reels up and then expect to hit 1 million followers the way Zohran did. He had about 45,000 followers in January. Let's say I've been tracking it, and I knew that he was going to hit 1 million by the primary, and on the night of the June 24th yesterday, he hit 1 million, and I was like, just like clockwork, it all makes sense, everything that happened. And so I'm just really curious to see what he does. And I think the most important thing, I've said many times, his policies weren't my favorite. Some of them are fine. Some of them I feel neutral about. I think a good point that was brought up in an article I read, regarding free buses, because if you're familiar with New York City, it is not actually the mayor's discretion what happens with the MTA. The mayor can, recommend people for the MTA board, but it is a private board that is not elected by constituents. And ultimately, even though it's a service we only use here in New York City, decisions for the MTA are mostly made, or all made really, in Albany. So, that was a problem a lot of people spotted with his campaign promises. And one really good point that was brought up that I only read in the past week, and I don't remember where, but in, a media outlet, was that his point, I've never heard him say it himself, but in the article they said his point is that there shouldn't be double dipping, right? The people of New York City are already paying taxes, that go towards the public transportation system, and therefore, at least residents shouldn't also be paying a fee to ride the buses. And I thought that was a great point. And so maybe there could be a program where, either we don't pay taxes anymore, although I don't recommend that because so many people skip the fare. So it should be undo the fare, pay the taxes, because the taxes are easier to legally abide by. And, residents, we could all get some kind of a free pass where we get through subway, buses, and then we only charge tourists or people who are commuting here for one way or another. I'm guessing also if you have an office here, your office, if you live in New Jersey, for instance, but work in New York City and your office pays taxes here, your office could also provide you with that kind of thing. Again, these are kind of big, complex ideas. And then the biggest problem I have with his policy is that I would say the mental health crisis here in New York City is like the number 2 biggest issue in the city after the affordability crisis, which includes housing and just cost of living in general. And, when I say mental health crisis, it's that we have a lot of people going through a serious mental health issue, just roaming the streets, hurting themselves, hurting other people, and just not getting the help that they need. It's not helpful to them. They're not enjoying life at its best quality. They're unhoused, they're not showered, they're not eating properly, and they're certainly not getting medication, all these problems. And while many Democrats believe that we should fix an assortment of laws, including Kendra's law, which you can look up, which kind of says that, you're only allowed to place these people in a mental health services for 48 to 72 hours. Many Democrats believe that there should be a point at which mental health experts can make an executive decision that there are certain people roaming the streets here in New York City who cannot advocate for themselves and their own mental health care. and do need to be taken, I don't want to say against their will because that sounds crazy, but and need to be removed and put into a mental health facility. And his campaign does not agree with that. And that's a point where I think sometimes you can be so empathetic. And this is, again, I've read a lot of articles about this. You can be so empathetic that you end up causing harm to individuals. Obviously, if you're watching the show, you probably know me. I'm a big advocate of making decisions for yourself and personal responsibility and being in charge of your own destiny. But I don't think letting people who are in the throes of schizophrenia make a decision that they should, not be under the care of a mental health professional. I don't think that's empathy. I think it's dangerous to those people and also dangerous to other New Yorkers. So that's my biggest gripe. Just because people, we're asking, so I want to break it down. But, I think that's something that we can work on, together, and we'll see. Anyway, that's kind of what's going on. And although I did not endorse a candidate, obviously when it came to the end, all my work for Don't Rank Cuomo was, basically a backhanded way of helping Zohran win. So and I knew that, but again, my main goal is we cannot let these old, bad, and it's not even old, just we can't keep letting bad people win because we know their name and because they, quote, know what's going on. Andrew Cuomo has proven time and time again that he uses his connections to help himself and his friends, and we're just not doing that anymore. And I think another thing that Zohran's campaign has to look towards in these coming months is not just his relationship with Black and Jewish voters, also his relationship in general with lower income voters. Tablet magazine posted, and they sourced this from the New York Times, but I'm just reading it from Tablet magazine's Instagram because they have infographs. And they write, despite branding himself as a champion of the working class, Mamdani's base told a different story. Cuomo won lower income precincts by a wide margin. Mamdani carried both middle and higher income areas, winning the wealthiest by double digits. And it was, plus 13 points for Cuomo in any area in New York City where the income was lower than $62,800. And then it says Mamdani was not the choice of the city's working class voters. And again, I point this out, not to take away from his win, but to honestly, not that his team is watching this, but to give some food for thought going into the general election, and also some food for thought in general towards for the Democratic Party. Because again, this section of working class voters is still a section that no Democrat has really figured out yet. And it says here, Mamdani's base was younger, whiter, which I think is really interesting in a city as diverse as New York City, and richer. His strongest support came from high-income, gentrified neighborhoods, so mostly not native New Yorkers, dominated by professionals, not laborers. These are the very areas displacing the city's poor and working-class residents. And I think that's really important to point out. And, my theory is that you can't hide the stench of growing up wealthy. Zohran grew up extremely wealthy. And no matter how kind you are, first it's in the way you speak. I don't think he's really guilty of using too much language that is not digestible. And I think he did a really great job, as we've talked about just really talking about the three main points of his campaign, the three main policies in his platform, which was freezing the rent, universal child care for free, and well, there's kind of four actually, free buses, and then the city-run grocery stores. Those were the main points of his campaign, and he did a great job about reiterating those points. And again, all that language is pretty easy. The only one that could be complicated is freezing the rent because, if you're not familiar, it could read as that you're freezing the rent for all New Yorkers when you're not. You're just freezing the rent for people who live in rent-stabilized housing, which is, only a small percentage of people. But reiterating those points and not getting stuck in the spider web that is policy, like someone like Jessica Ramos did, who, again, I think is just so smart at policy, but really too smart to connect with people. This was a hot mayor's race, and most people voting still were only really familiar with two candidates, maybe three, because at the end, people started to get more and more familiar with Brad Lander. And Brad Lander's a man with 30 years of experience in politics and made, looking at the votes, really made a minimal splash. But to his credit, again, as was pointed out in several articles I read, he certainly had the choice. Did he want to give his votes to Andrew Cuomo, or did he want to give his votes to Zohran Mamdani? And he made the more ethical move to give his votes to Zohran Mamdani. And for that, he certainly should be applauded. But, now we're going to see more and more people who are going to start to fear the progressive movement. And, they're going to go, oh, shit, I can't phone in my job anymore. I can't phone in this seat in Congress. I can't phone in this, committee I've been on for years and years, because young people are pissed. And young people are coming for your fucking jobs. And no matter if we win or lose or get knocked off the ballot by the Board of Elections, we're going to keep trying. And, just the grossest thing about Andrew Cuomo's campaign is that he just phoned it in. He didn't try. Again, I ran for mayor and I did not meet Andrew Cuomo. Do you know how crazy that is? I saw Zohran multiple times throughout this process. I did multiple forums with him. I did multiple events with him. Brad Lander saw him many times throughout this process. Michael Blake saw him many times throughout this process. Adrian Adams saw, it's not Jessica Ramos even. It's just really, really, really crazy. And I was, and I was really thinking about it because, it's not, I do feel like it's become since October 7th, almost trendy to be anti-Semitic, quite frankly. It's become trendy. And again, I just wish we could move away from the identity politics, which is a critique I've had of the Democratic Party for so long. I loved that Kamala ran a race where she didn't talk about being a woman. And while I understand that it is historic for Zohran that he is Muslim, I don't know if it's the right move or if it's the move that makes everyone feel comfortable as New Yorkers. And certainly there should not be Islamophobia in that we fear someone who is Muslim. That's very problematic as well. It's just that there is something weird about leading with that in a speech and getting an applause break for that over your policies. And that's, the same. I would feel also weird if someone was clapping because someone was Jewish, or clapping because someone's a woman, or clapping because you say someone's black, or clapping, any of these things. It's just like, we can recognize that it's historic, but I do think these things continue to separate the Democratic Party when we really need to be uniting over things like it's too expensive to exist in the world for people who are working, 60, 70 hours a week. And I think we start where we agree, and we can make a lot of we can do great things together. Because quite frankly, let's say Zohran doesn't like Jewish people, just hypothetically. If he feels that way in his heart, in the privacy of his own home, as a Jewish person, I kind of don't care as long as he keeps it out of his New York City policies. Because I do believe you can have a feeling in your heart that you don't, personally. We all have bias. And to hope for a leader who doesn't have bias is not gonna happen. And it reminded me of when I was running, and these were trolls, but some, men did bring up the fact that I have, made pretty extreme, anti-men statements. And I was like, I know it was people who were trolling me, not who had pure intentions. But I was like, I'll even take that and sit with that because I don't disagree. I had, in my heart, on my own time, I like women better than men on my own time. But as a leader, I would not lead or make laws or not advocate for men. So I really applied that to my thoughts on Zohran. But then just please, but also please stop the cult mentality around him, because first of all, it's going to set yourself up for disappointment because every leader ends up letting us down, even if it's in a small way. I don't want you to be apathetic, but just the fanfare, again, I've made this complaint about AOC as well. The fanfare is really fucking weird. We shouldn't have fanfare around political figures. These are our public servants. These are our representatives. They work for us. Remember, Zohran's mayor. Zohran works for you. You don't work for Zohran. And the second thing is just the women being like, oh, he's so hot. He's so dreamy. Putting him on covers of Teen Beat. It's weird. Can we just I agree. I think it's hot when someone takes a stance and advocates and is ethical and gets people out to vote, and all those things are sexy. But this, it makes us look so dumb, quite honestly, as women, to be like, I'm lit for Zohran. It just it gave me the ick so hard. And also this guy weighs 130 pounds and he's married. So you're making me ill. This is the kind of stuff that really distracts from all the good that he's doing. It's just fucking weird. Just as much as we complain about men not being able to separate their sexuality from their interests, I often feel, sometimes we're guilty of the same thing. Can't you just appreciate Zohran for who he is without being like, he's so hot, I'm so into him? Can't you just be like, wow, it's really cool and strong that a man is standing up for these things, or that he's, engaging young people in this way without being like, I gotta fuck him? Can we separate those things? I would love to. The same way we need to separate church and state, can we separate our loins from our ideals? Because it makes me ill. It makes me ill. It's weird. It was weird when women did it to Bill Clinton. It was weird when women did it to Barack Obama. It was weird when women did it to Andrew Cuomo. And it's weird when you're doing it to Zohran Mamdani. It's weird. Stop doing it. Obviously we all have celebrity crushes, but the entire group of people who voted for him are not, you all have a crush on him. And is that the only, if Zohran was hideously ugly, but ran the same campaign, would you have not voted for him? Come on. Because now, again, that just makes us look dumb. It just makes us look dumb if we're voting for people because we think they're hot. Bernie Sanders did way better with men than women. Was it because he wasn't hot? I don't know. I don't think he was hot when he was young either. Let me look. I don't think he was. Bernie Sanders, young. I got to check. I've seen pictures. It depends. This is if you like a Woody Allen type, he could be attractive. He looked like he had cool style. But again, it's just, I don't know. And then I was watching something on MSNBC, and they were talking about, and this was unrelated to the mayor's race, but more related to the Democratic Party. And the commentators were talking about who you are is still seemingly more important than what you stand for. And I think that is still something that needs to be solved. And we won't really know if that rings true or not until, Zohran gets elected as, mayor in the general election, if and when that happens. And then they also said that, right now people are craving authenticity. And one of the commentators also said, and this is a direct quote, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but they said anything that was authentic is better than anything that seems political. So right now, and that's why I never worried about, experience along the way. And I'm actually happy to see that voters didn't let, Zohran's lack of experience, in quotes, deter them from voting for him, because I don't think if you didn't vote for him, I truly in my heart don't believe inexperience should have been the reason. But we'll see. Again, a lot of dreams go to die in Albany, as the saying goes in New York City municipal politics. So I want to go over a couple of articles for him. First of all, let's go to Donald Trump's fucking response to this. The 2-year-old got access to the computer again. So let's look into this. What? So now my Instagram is not loading. Mike, can you have the access to those tweets? Because my phone is now not. Wait, let me turn my internet off and maybe I can get access to it. I have everything saved and organized. Okay, yeah, I can get it with it when I turn my internet off, which is always fun. So, of course, we knew Trump was going to say something, crazy. And so he gets on Truth Social and he goes, "It's finally happened. The Democrats have crossed the line. Zohran Mamdani," and, honestly, he did spell it right, which I thought he would write something, racist, but he didn't get to that yet. "A 100% communist lunatic." He's a socialist, but okay, has just won the Democratic primary and is on his way to becoming mayor. We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting a little ridiculous. He looks terrible, all caps. Again, I just went on a rant about how you stop creaming publicly over him. It's embarrassing. He doesn't look terrible. He's very put together and looks better than many candidates because he brushed his hair. His voice is grating. I also disagree. He's quite media trained when you really look at him, and he has a lovely voice. He's not very smart. He's very highly educated. His dad's a professor at Columbia. He's got AOC +3 dummies all backing him, and even our great Palestinian senator, crying Chuck Schumer, is groveling over him. Yes, this is a big moment in the history of our country. I have an idea for the Democrats to bring them back into play, and he puts play in quotation marks. After years of being left out in the cold, including suffering one of the greatest losses in history, the 2024 presidential election. Yep, I mean, he speaks truth there. The Democrats should nominate low IQ candidate Jasmine Crockett for president, and AOC +3 should be, respectively, vice president, and 3 high-level members of the cabinet, added together with our future communist mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, and our country is really screwed. So, just obviously handling it exactly the way that we thought he would handle it, like a big baby.
Wait, was that an AOC fat joke?
No, what? No, he's talking about the squad.
Oh, okay.
AOC +3. He's talking about her and the squad. It should be to get put together as one unit.
Oh, okay. I thought he was saying she's so big she should take up the vice presidency and 3 sizable cabinet seats.
I've never heard anyone call her fat. She's not.
Have you not seen? That's like
she's not fat.
The last. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying.
She's beautiful.
All right. The last day, the discourse, certainly on my feed, has been she's reaching critical territory.
I don't even want to have this conversation because I think this is yuck, but I did notice that she has really big boobs that I never noticed before, but I don't know, I think she's secretly married. Maybe she's secretly pregnant. It's not really any of our business. That's what I would guess. If she gained weight, it's because maybe she's pregnant and she doesn't want everyone up in her business. Because if she wants to have a family, she probably got to do it sooner than later. And I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know her aspirations. I haven't talked to her about her personal life, But I did notice in an interview recently that her boobs had gotten really big, which to me says, I don't know, because there's nothing she personally, unless it's something in her personal life, but politically, I don't think she's gone through anything where she would gain weight or something. I don't know. But yeah, that would be my guess. Because I actually was thinking about that. Because I was just curious. Women who accomplish a lot, I'm always curious. I'm like, oh, are they going to is she going to have a baby? Isn't she? I'm just curious for my own, keeping tabs on things. But that was my thought. I did notice that. But I think she looks great, and with the amount of stress that she must be under too, it's admirable. I gained 6 pounds alone running for mayor of New York City. I've mostly lost it, but my stress level was through the fucking roof. All right. And now I want to read this article from NBC. And again, I do actually think this is, this story has affected everyone. So that's why I'm taking the time to go over this. And then, if you're so tired of hearing about this, we won't harp on this until we get closer to November. What Zohran Mamdani's rise in New York City means for the Democratic Party nationally. The state legislator scored a stunning result after forcefully challenging former Governor Andrew Cuomo from the left in the Democratic mayoral primary. This is from NBC News. Zohran Mamdani's dramatic, strong showing in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary, where he forced a concession from former Governor Andrew Cuomo. And again, I know some people are confused about our voting process here. Andrew Cuomo conceded the primary. He said, Zohran won the primary. He will be on the ticket under the, on the Democratic Party line. But Andrew Cuomo previously also petitioned so that he can run on the independent line. So he has the choice whether or not he wants to run in the general election and can run as an independent. He did the work. You had to make the decision previously because you had to get that petition in. But he did that. So it's either going to be Republican Curtis Sliwa against independent incumbent Eric Adams versus Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. And possibly could also be versus Andrew Cuomo. But I think there's a lot of concern that Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams will end up splitting the vote amongst each other. So amounts to a massive shot in the arm for progressives and other Democrats who have been imploring their party's elder statesmen to step aside for a new generation of leaders. And I mean, the problem with Andrew Cuomo is, he is older. That's not even the problem here. Again, I think sometimes ageism goes too far, especially when we see someone like Bernie Sanders still getting crowds going up in his old age. But to me, it's just we have to stop electing criminals, crooks, untrustworthy people, regardless of their age. Mamdani ran his campaign as an unapologetic progressive against an established favorite who argued his pragmatism would best meet the moment. A 33-year-old fresh face against a field of experienced candidates, a democratic socialist at a time when many Democrats worry whether that moniker alienates them from swing voters, and a critic of Israel's conduct in its war against Hamas, despite criticism from moderate Democrats who accused him of stoking anti-Semitism. Tuesday night's election was far from a clear test case for any single one of those factors, with Cuomo's 2021 resignation as governor amid allegations of sexual harassment and COVID mismanagement also in play. And New York City Democratic primary voters are hardly representative of the swing district and swing state electorates that determine who holds power in Washington. One reason why Republicans are already using Mamdani as a rhetorical foil to swing seat Democrats. And I do also want to point out, if you're so angry about Zohran Mamdani, do you not understand this is a direct response to Donald Trump? So we're playing this extreme game. People go, why does it have to be so radical? Why does it have to be so progressive? Well, why does MAGA have to be so much crazier than just regular conservative? It's you'd think that the left wasn't going to have a response for that. Honestly, maybe with the show we've been putting on lately, it would make sense that we wouldn't have a response for that. But ultimately, someone came up with a response for that. And, it is the DSA. But Mamdani's surge, putting him on the precipice of the Democratic nomination with the results, he has it. We were talking like he doesn't. He has it. With the results of the ranked choice tabulation set to come next week, is putting the rest of the Democratic Party on notice. Voters are sick of the status quo, sick of being force-fed these old, uninspiring candidates and told to vote for them or else. And they want change. If mainstream Democrats don't understand that and offer that, voters are going to look elsewhere, said Liz Smith, a longtime Democratic operative who was a key part of Pete Buttigieg's 2020 presidential bid and who previously worked for Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo as a candidate combined the worst qualities of Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Smith continued. He left office in disgrace like Donald Trump did, and was running on a vengeance tour. And like Joe Biden, he was old. He didn't have any new ideas, no ability to inspire people. And let's add to that, he didn't even try. As someone joked on Twitter last night, it's funny that Andrew Cuomo's and I'm paraphrasing here, it's funny that Andrew Cuomo's first public appearance was his concession speech, which was true. The guy phoned it the fuck in. And I do not, more than anything else, the thing that I hate more than anything, more than anti-Semitism, more than misogyny, is being lazy. I hate it more than anything, but phoning it the fuck in. I hate that more than anything else in the world. During his victory speech Tuesday night, Mamdani discussed not only the impact he hopes to have on the city, but how he believes his win will echo across the country. The mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism, to stop masked ICE agents from deporting our neighbors, and to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party, a party where we fight for working people with no apology, Mamdani said. He added, if this campaign has demonstrated anything to the world, it is that our dreams can become reality. Meyer Rupert, a Democratic strategist who managed the 2021 mayoral campaign of Democrat Maya Wiley, who is incredible, you can research her if you're not familiar, told NBC News that Mamdani's decisive victory is a signal to the left that its candidates can run unapologetically authentic campaigns that take tough issues head on with progressive solutions. I think we'll see how authentic it is. I think right now when we're using the word authentic as more like it was an accessible youth-oriented campaign. We won't know if it's authentic or not until he gets into office. These issues aren't unpopular. We just need a way to communicate them across geography, across a multiracial coalition, across partisan divides. He was able to do that, and more than that, show other people across the country how it can be done, she said. We've heard this so much since the election. Democrats have gone too far afield. The vilification of talking about social justice, talking about racial justice, that you can't do that stuff and also win. You can, and if it's where your politics are, you can't do it any other way. I really believe that. So I hope there are more people that are going to take this moment and decide to run like this, because it really does seem to be our path forward, she said. Not everyone in the party agrees. Representatives Laura Gillen and Tom Suozzi, two New Yorkers who are veterans of battleground congressional races, put out statements criticizing Mamdani after his victory. Gillen called him too extreme, and Suozzi said that his concerns remain about Mamdani. And I agree. We should have concerns about all these people. Just because someone is new doesn't mean that we should trust them, right? But again, we know 100% Andrew Cuomo is not trustworthy. So while I share possible about Mamdani, again, I have 100% about Cuomo. As he did on election night, Mamdani spent much of this campaign grounding his appeal to voters around the economy. His campaign website prominently declares that he's running to lower the cost of living for working-class New Yorkers. His most talked about policy platform centered around affordability, proposals like free city buses, freezing rents, reforms to make housing more affordable, city-owned grocery stores, and free childcare, all paid for by raising taxes on the top 1% and corporations. And, a lot of corporations have threatened to leave New York City if he becomes mayor. I feel like most of those are probably empty threats, the same way as so many Americans threatened to move to Canada if Donald Trump got elected. Are you still here? I think you are. What Zohran did was so important. Was he was talking about finances the way New Yorkers talk about finances, Rupert said, pointing to Mamdani's emphasis on personal economic issues. I mean, when you break it down, he really did exactly what fucking Donald Trump did, but he just wasn't Donald Trump compared with other and hopefully he's not lying the way Donald Trump was lying, compared with other Democrats with tendencies to focus on macroeconomic trends. Instead of talking about New York as a whole, he brought it down to a granular level for people, what it meant. The focus on the economy is something many Democrats, Mamdani supporters or not, say is a key takeaway for party members looking to glean something from his victory. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of Brooklyn, who did not endorse a candidate in the mayoral primary, repeatedly referred to Mamdani's economic message during an interview Wednesday on MSNBC's Morning Joe when asked to explain the election result. The relentless focus on affordability had great appeal across the city of New York. And it's interesting because obviously, affordability is going to be important in a capitalist nation, but he is running on socialism. So again, I'm interested to see how this all plays out. He also clearly outworked. Yes, he did. Out-organized. Yes, he did. And out-communicated the opposition. And that is not up for discussion. He just did all those things. So when someone is successful at being able to do all three things at the same time, it's usually going to work out, he said. But I don't necessarily agree with that because there has been so many articles that I read in preparation for running that were talking about how it's pretty much always the person with the most money in their bank account wins. And, Andrew Cuomo at the end of this primary had $35 million in his bank account compared to Mamdani at number 2's $9 million. And I know you're thinking like, how the fuck did he get all that extra money? Because the cap is like the legal cap that you're allowed to fundraise as a mayoral candidate for the primary is like it's close, like it's like 7 point something million. And Mamdani reached that several months ago. So this other money that both individuals have has to come from political action committees getting together, and there's a way to get more money through the establishment of political action committees. Again, we won't get into the nitty-gritty of it. It's not necessary, but that's like in short how you're able to accumulate more funds. And also I think that Andrew Cuomo, and also this is another thing. So I think Andrew Cuomo, because he has such a legacy, I have to double check this because it didn't pertain to me as a first-time candidate, but I believe you can only raise for the primary that much money, but he could have had extra money in his bank account from previous runs because you can move that over to a new account. And I don't think that would count against your new earnings. I'm pretty sure I got to double check that though. While Cuomo also discussed his plans to make the city more affordable, much of his campaign was based around his unique experience and history standing up to Trump. But that experience was a double-edged sword, and Mamdani repeatedly reminded voters of Cuomo's checkered past at a moment when many Democrats are calling for new faces in their party. And as a lot of commentators pointed out, Andrew Cuomo was talking about the past and this is what I've done, this is my resume, while Mamdani was really focused on ideas for the future. And that's a criticism that I've had of so many candidates in the mayoral race. I would get on these, into these endorsement meetings, and people would just find a way to answer questions by basically listing off their resume. And that's all fine and good, but it's like, what are your ideas for the city now in this moment? David Hogg, the Florida activist and former National Party official who broke with the Democratic National Committee over his decision to support primary challengers running against Democratic office holders, said that the result reinforced the movement to energize young voters around a push for a new direction. The people have spoken, and they're saying that the establishment is cooked, he said in a statement. All right, we don't need to read the rest of this because, again, I don't want to spend the whole time on this, and that was kind of enough from that article. I do quickly want to, as a counterpoint, read this thing from this opinion piece from the Boston Globe. I have a little bit of an idea of what it says. I couldn't get fully through it because I didn't have access, and I certainly wasn't going to pay to subscribe to the Boston Globe. But can you pull that up for me, Mike? Maybe we do a little Mike reading for this. I feel like if someone's going to read a Boston Globe article, you'd be perfect for it.
Do I got to talk like I'm from Southie?
Sure, do.
No.
You could do accents.
I ride the New York subway. No, I can't. All right, Bowdoin Nepo Baby as class warrior. Zohran Mamdani embodies the left's luxury benefits, quote unquote. The New York City mayoral candidate's platform, if implemented, would yield the type of dysfunction that only an elite could afford to weather or to move away from. And this is by Karen Hajar, I think. Is that how you pronounce that? I ride the New York subway multiple times a week. In the past year, I've had a homeless man on a subway platform tell me he wanted to rape me in the middle of the day.
Welcome to New York.
Welcome to New York.
It's been waiting for you.
I've been spit on. I've seen genitalia and public masturbation, and I've endured threatening catcalls. I dress carefully. I always have pepper spray, and more often than before,
That's illegal, babe.
What is it?
Yeah.
All right. And more often than before, I am forced to ignore the price and just call the damn Uber. It's a nightmare, but it's also a fact of life for many New Yorkers. So too are high taxes, skyrocketing house prices, slow construction, public disorder, shoplifting, and more. These are all issues that hurt groups progressives claim to care about, like women and people of color. Yet progressives voted for a guy who's going to exacerbate the problem. On Tuesday night, Zohran Mamdani, a 33-year-old socialist and state assembly member, declared victory in the Democratic primary over Andrew Cuomo, New York's former governor, who was long thought to be the frontrunner and a field of other candidates. Mamdani's energetic campaign was able to sell enough optimism to obscure the utopian nature of his socialist platform, which will be conveniently funded by wealthy residents. And Cuomo was unable to effectively challenge Mamdani in the finer points of his fanciful promises. Mamdani will face incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, who's running as an independent in the general election this fall. Mamdani's promises, like city-owned grocery stores, free childcare, and a rent freeze, would no doubt push out workers and capital while scaring away big business, and if he actually made good on them. And even though the New York Police Department has a staffing crisis, Mamdani has no plans to hire more officers, but instead he plans to institute a Department of Community Safety, which is meant to, quote-unquote, prevent violence before it happens. His platform, if implemented, would yield the type of dysfunction that only an elite could afford to weather or to move away from. Rob Henderson, a Globe opinion contributing writer and Manhattan Institute senior fellow, has described Mamdani as a poster child for luxury beliefs, a term Henderson coined that is defined as ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class at very little cost, while often inflicting cost on the lower classes. But the idea in general has come to define and plague a Democratic Party that's scaring working class voters away and replacing them with privileged elites who don't feel the full brunt of progressive policies. This is an article I can get behind.
Well, it's something I'm really interested in exploring, because another thing that has bothered me about Mamdani's campaign is that this is especially relevant because he is a person of color. He is an immigrant, so you think he should be more appealing to immigrants and people of color. But his following is very, very white. And, you know, there are people of color who like him, but the way he has, I don't want to say he's alienated, but the lack of enthusiasm from black voters and lower income voters, that has to be explored. How can it not be?
Okay. I mean, they're, you know.
What's your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I think that, you know, typically black and low income neighborhoods go for the name you know. You know what I mean? That's like Eddie Murphy had a whole movie about this.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like you vote for the name you know.
So right. So to me, but that's also saying black communities don't feel like there's enough outreach, and I know the Bronx feels that way as an entire borough. And there has to be a way through this. And if they don't know your name, Zohran did a great job of getting everyone else to know his name. So how do you get black people to know your name? You said he appeared on The Breakfast Club, which is kind of like the New York City show hosted by, you know, black entertainers, Charlamagne tha God and everything. So, you know, and you said that you looked at the comments section for his appearance on The Breakfast Club, even though I think, you know, Charlamagne is super left leaning and was very interested in Zohran's policies. What do you remember some of the things that they were saying in the comments about him?
Not offhand. I can go pull them up now, though.
Right. And I also want to say, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Pepper spray, someone told me it is legal, but there's like all these laws around the use and how you buy it in New York City. But technically, yes, you can carry it. All right, continue the article.
Sorry, I went to look up those comments.
Do both at once.
Well, I can do that only because I studied at the foot of Gas Digital for years. As a New York tax driver, I got $5,000 for what I was robbed by Uber and Lyft. Mamdani was one who secured his tax alliance lawsuit. Man, this guy is not playing. So that seemed to be pretty good, positive. This shit is so weird. At the debate where they were asking him about visiting Israel, what was that about?
That was weird, and that's crazy that we keep asking people if they're visiting Israel. And I said this on my live stream, but I think Zohran's answer was the best answer, and obviously it was a way for him to get around not wanting to visit Israel, and that's fine. And it does not bother me at all as a Jew. But he said I would stay in New York City because I'm the mayor of New York City, and I agree with him on that. The mayor of New York City does not need to be making fucking international trips. Stay in New York City and handle all the problems that we have here, because we certainly have a boatload.
I saw the inverse of Eric Adams the other day, a compilation of him being like, New York City is the Lima of America. New York City is the Rio de Janeiro of America. Like whenever he's speaking to different groups, he talks about different cities he's been to and how that place is the New York of their country.
I see.
Very funny.
He's a real character.
He's
Too bad he's mayor. Otherwise he'd be a great hang.
Yeah, genuinely. NYC resident here. I've always been an independent, but today I registered as a Democratic just so I can vote for Zohran. If this guy don't win, I don't want to hear people complain about politicians not delivering for them. Here's a politician talking about how to make our lives better. I think that's the big thing is like specifically in those communities, it's come to a point where it's like, it doesn't matter who's in there. Like, no one's doing anything for me. I've been neglected so long.
And I agree with that. And I think that, that was kind of like the real foundation of Michael Blake's campaign is like, we're going to finally concentrate on Black constituents. And
he got the lowest vote turnout, and it kills me.
Yeah, because when you hear someone's platform basically outright say, I'm going to concentrate on Black constituents, white people can say all they want. They can put fucking Black Lives Matter in their Instagram bio. But when push comes to shove, if the candidate is saying, I'm actually going to make you as a white person a second-class citizen and concentrate on Black voters first, they're not voting for that person. And I did vote for Michael Blake on my roster. And I was happy to, because it's like, when we talk about it, like, I'm okay. I have the things that I need, and I'm very lucky to have the things that I need. And I agree that I would be fine taking 4 years as a second-class citizen to get Black constituents taken care of. I think that would be more than fair. More than fair. But, that's kind of this talk about like luxury ideals. It's like people are fine voting for the interests of other people as long as they don't have to give anything up themselves. And I think that's a point, that is being made in this Boston Globe article. And something I certainly personally came across on the campaign trail. That's why I'm just so sick of fucking tote bags and stickers and, everything. It's just like, yeah, you want all these people to have rights right after you have rights.
This is my favorite comment, and then I'll get back to the article. It says, this is the most beautiful, supportive comment section the Breakfast Club has ever known. I love him, and I love all of you.
Oh, see, I thought you were saying that the comments were tearing him apart. These are mostly good comments about Zohran.
I don't recall that. I will...
well, maybe now that he's won, the tide has changed, because even in the past 24 hours, we've seen a lot of politicians running to, endorse him. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but this article is literally hitting everything that I was thinking for the last hour.
That's why you're reading it.
The dude got endorsed by 2 of the 3 Cumtown members. That can't be good for working class people.
And why do you say that? Cumtown doesn't, aren't the fans of Cumtown mostly working class people?
I mean, they're Bernie bros, but they're also
Right.
mostly like, millennials who got office jobs and hated their life, but made 6 figures a year and just listened to podcasts, and it's like,
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that it was like a little bit wealthier than other podcasts of that nature. Like, I'm obviously familiar with Cumtown, but I was not like it. I've listened to some episodes, but like, it's just not, it's a podcast for men.
no, but I feel, yeah, of course.
It's a boy podcast.
But I feel like the people whose sensibilities they were like going after was like, a lot of my friends who went the traditional, like, go to college, get out, get a job in finance. And like they, for whatever reason, just glammed on to Cumtown. And it's like, that's who you're going after when you're giving that endorsement. Because
I could see Stavi like appealing more to lower income people. Nick Mullen is very highbrow, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, I'll get back to the article here. Voters signaled as much. According to polls ahead of the election, Cuomo led Black voters and women, while Mamdani peddled the myth of a working people's movement that was actually made up of college-educated voters, whites, white voters and men. When the dust settled, Mamdani built a diversive coalition of white, Asian, and Hispanic voters across Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. But he rang up large margins in young, affluent parts of the city like Park Slope and Cobble Hill in Brooklyn, and the East Village in parts of Midtown and Manhattan. A Manhattan Institute poll ahead of the election showed that women who listed crime as their top issue sided overwhelmingly with Cuomo. The young men I know don't deal with as many verbal threats of sexual assault on the subway.
And Zohran really didn't. Not only did he not talk about crime a lot in his platform, he was very notoriously like a defund the police person, which, in theory, like back in the day, I don't think I was ever like defund the police, but I'm not a fan of the police.
No, I remember your stance because I remember what is said on this show, and it was reform the police.
Oh, okay, good. Because I was like, I don't think I ever said. I'm glad someone's. It's honestly easier to listen to retain something someone else is saying than when it's coming out of your own mouth. And I still believe in that. I think and that was why my policy reflected reforming the police with the required mental health checks. And Zohran also wanted to do this thing that I literally read about factually. I'm not shitting you, on the Ben and Jerry's website, if we want to talk about how lefty it is. But he wanted to create basically like community watch groups, which historically, they've only been done, obviously more so in liberal spaces, but they have had a pretty good success rate. But he wanted to, create these more community kind of watchdog groups rather than, giving a lot of power to the police. And I think people felt uncomfortable with that, especially women. Moment of silence.
Oh, I didn't realize my mic wasn't on.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were just taking a moment of silence for the death of Andrew Cuomo's career.
He'll be fine. He was in it for the book deal anyway.
Right. Daddy's back.
No, like there is a part of me that's like, did the establishment really run Cuomo as this is the one guy who I know we can band enough people together on to get this socialist over?
I just thought.
Ooh, how did Weiner do, by the way?
Oh, terrible.
Really?
I could have beat Anthony Weiner. He got 1,000 votes. It was, I will say, when you're running for city council, no one's getting more than 10,000 votes in this first round. It's so low. But yeah, Anthony Weiner came in fourth place. So number one was Harvey Epstein, who was really well known in my district. So that made sense. Number two was Sarah Batchu, who was a young woman who I thought ran an excellent campaign, but raised, $250,000, which I thought was actually shouldn't even be allowed for city council. But ran a great campaign, was really out there. And for all that money and for all that time, she got 5,000 votes in this first round. I was like, what is this all for? Number three was a socialist candidate who texted me a picture, not directly, but through, political texting of her with Zohran on election day. And I was like, wow, you're really trying to ride his coattails to the win. And she came in third. Her name is, I don't know how she pronounces it. I think it's Andrea Gordillo. And then number four was Anthony Weiner.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then number five was
city council.
They
wouldn't have shut you down.
Well, but it would have been a waste of time. First of all, I wouldn't have been able to fundraise in the way that I did because people all over the country are just not going to be excited that I'm running for city council. Where in the way that they were excited that I'm running for mayor. So part of that was strategic. Number two, I know Anthony Weiner and stuff. Some bigger names like Anthony Weiner, but Anthony Weiner was running for city council because he fucking went to jail for sexting a teen, and this was all that he could start at. And he still didn't succeed in that. And then also, I truly just felt like I've, not in service, but in different ways, I've kind of done this, the city council work. That's a level one. I know I haven't done the work in New York City specifically, but when you're talking about advocacy and getting people together and really rallying what my strengths are, my strengths would be better used in as mayor. And I truly believed that. You don't need to have star power in city council, and you just become entrenched in the political nonsense in New York City, and you can't get out of it. I was trying to go around the filth that exists in municipal politics, and I don't think going through from that rung of city council you can do that, because you are kind of beholden to so many other people in a way that I didn't feel comfortable being beholden. So that's my answer for that.
All right, fair enough. All right. No matter under a Mamdani mayorship, cops will have other priorities. Mamdani, who's been in favor of defunding the police, said cops would be better served only focusing on serious crimes like quote-unquote shootings and murders, and other police work should be handled by quote-unquote mental health professionals and social workers. And on the subway in particular, he proposes posting specialists, including peers, mental health professionals, and EMTs to engage with New Yorkers experiencing homelessness and mental health crises.
We're gonna have so this is why women didn't vote for him, because they don't want a Brown University graduate in a Zohran Mamdani yellow bandana trying to help as a unhoused person is trying to stab them in the face. Like they don't with a scissor. Like that's not. They don't want someone being talked down. They don't want someone in Zohran Mamdani bandana being like, "What was your childhood like?" As someone tries to stab them with a scissor in the face. Which is like, I'm laughing, but like I've definitely had a person who's mentally unstable chase everyone around in a subway car with a scissor, and I guess that's alarming to some people. But as a 22+ year New Yorker, it's just another day in the greatest city in the world, baby. Like it doesn't bother me. I don't know.
I mean, there was a time where I was quote unquote unhoused.
Yes.
Experiencing homelessness, as this article puts it.
Right.
And I did see like women running from a like legit crazed homeless person at like
we all have
3 in the morning.
We've all done it. I've had a run. I remember being at the subway station that's by the Museum of Natural History, and I was the only person in the subway station because that's not uncommon as a comedian. And there was someone who has to be a serial killer if he had the motivation to kill that many, just going crazy. And I had to run out of that station, not only run, but strategically plan an exit so that he wouldn't get to me. I mean, and again, like, it's funny, like it's just like it's unfazed, and I guess that's just part of living, in New York City. But what's interesting is also that when you look at the stats, and I studied the safety and subway stations for this race, it is these high traffic tourist subway stations, your Grand Central, your Times Square, where the most crime is taking place. So for the average New Yorker, subway safety actually really isn't an issue. Because these are happening in these high, and that's why it's almost like, it's almost like New Yorkers kind of planned it. We're like, well, let's put these, unhinged people in spaces where only the tourists will see them, and we'll keep them out of the city. It really almost seems planned.
Yeah, I just could not picture those women as they're running, screaming, get me a therapist.
Right. Yeah.
Get me a social worker.
Well, I think that's the problem. So I think Zohran's campaign, it's like, I certainly agree, and I think most Democratic candidates agreed that police are being called to instances where you need a mental health professional. I also think that to only reserve police presence for, like, murders is not the way to go. There's also a lot of other crimes that they need to be handling. But yeah, like a breakdown with no weapon, you can call a mental health professional too, for sure.
All right. But will a social worker restrain someone who is threatening to attack me? Can they stop a man from setting a woman on fire like happened on the F train in December?
Well, apparently no one can.
Yeah. Cops didn't help there, lady.
Yeah, they didn't. Reprehensible, really.
All right. Having more mental health support on the subway might be helpful, but only if there's a stronger police presence as well. Because sometimes mental health issues and addiction do turn into full-blown crime.
Sure.
Mamdani's movement typifies the kind of self-soothing progressivism that has come to define the Democratic Party, and that has been sold to young liberals as the path to justice. In reality, it's been the newest iteration of political elitism, where utopian vision of crime solving, and just about everything else is championed by people who don't feel the full consequences. The People's Warriors are just a Nepo baby who graduated from Bodine. But the people he purports to fight for knew better. While Mamdani did well with white voters, he struggled in predominantly black areas like the Bronx and Southeast Queens. These voters tend to live in higher crime areas of the city and probably don't want to gamble their safety and economic well-being so that the son of an Ivy League professor and a Hollywood movie director can cosplay a working-class warrior. And neither do I.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that the writer brings up, because it's really easy for many upper-class white individuals to be like, oh, we should be more empathetic towards criminals if they themselves have never been the victim of a crime. And so it's really easy, and white people were very, fast to be like, defund the police but it's when I did a lot of volunteer work for this campaign, and I went to areas that are more predominantly residential areas for people of color, the white people in that, who were volunteering that space, were like, police make us feel less comfortable. All the people of color, and this was mostly black women, were saying, no, we want police. Like, we're actually not going to go out on the streets of New York and do this volunteer work without a police escort. And I found that very interesting. And I think that's something we have to be, white people definitely need to be cognizant of, is that we sometimes think, or we oftentimes, with our stances and with our votes, kind of like just make an arbitrary decision what is best for people of color without ever asking them, like what's best for you, and following their lead. And that's been an ongoing fucking problem. I do want to give Zohran also a shout out. I get like a lot of animal welfare newsletters. That is one thing. I was disappointed because he wasn't supporting the bill, the Survivor Bill A101 that I was advocating for so much, and so survivors were really upset with him. But he does do a great job with animal welfare. He wants to recognize animals as sentient beings in law. He wants to ban commercial bird and dove releases. He wants to end the sale of new fur in New York City. He wants to launch a pet pantry pilot. He wants to include companion animals in paid sick leave. He wants to end the captivity of elephants in NYC. He wants to stop the retail sale of pet birds. He wants to create a citywide animal protection system. He offered support for wildlife rehabilitation. He wants to relocate carriage horses into Central Park, which I think is weak, because they should just be carriage horses just shouldn't exist at all. I'm a big fan of Rider's Law. He wants to prohibit octopus farming and imports, and he opposes the Dangerous Federal Eats Act. And in his role as Assembly member, Zohran is also a proud co-sponsor of VFAR's bill to ban the use of glue traps in state buildings, which is incredible. A big problem in the city. And anyone who's been following me for a long time knows that glue trap. A person an exterminator put glue traps when I was not home in an apartment that I was living in years ago. And when I came home, mice were stuck to them, and it was fucking horrific. And they should not be legal. I hated glue traps since I was a teenager, and I tried to save a mouse from a glue trap in high school, and it was terrible. It also says Zohran is tackling the affordability crisis with urgency and compassion. He's committed to ensuring pet guardians and rescuers are supported through policies that make housing, pet food, spay, neuter, and veterinary care more accessible, which should also lower the number of animals that are returned or surrendered to the shelter in general. Again, in theory. And the last thing I wanted to get into regarding this, because I think this is so important, because I think this win really reflects such a larger thing that we've been talking about in the Democratic Party. Because similar to Bernie, Zohran did much better with male voters than female voters. I don't think it was as drastic as Bernie, but it was there, I guess because Zohran's so hot. But this is an old article that I pulled up from 2020, just trying to explore why some of these more progressive male candidates really resonate with male voters more. This is from 538.com. Why are women less likely than men to support Sanders? After a stint as the Democratic primary frontrunner, Senator Bernie Sanders' revolution is rapidly stalling. After a series of surprising losses on Super Tuesday, he lost again in Michigan earlier this week, despite spending days campaigning across the state. In contest after contest, Sanders has struggled to make inroads with key Democratic constituencies, in particular Black voters and older voters. But there's another trend. So again, we're seeing similar themes, and so let's learn from them. But there's another trend that's plagued him throughout the primary. He does poorly with women. According to aggregated exit polls from the states that have voted so far, Sanders' support is 8 points lower among women than his support among men. Sanders has consistently been at a disadvantage among women in this year's primary, and that's not a deficit that a Democratic primary candidate can simply ignore, since women make up a majority of the party's electorate this year, 57% of primary voters so far. And, younger men are moving, more to, conservative voting. And so while women are kind of remaining the same in the Democratic voting. So you really want to understand why women aren't voting for you if they're not voting for you. Consistently having lower support among women is a problem of optics because it makes it look like there's something going on that prevents women from backing you, said Kelly Dittmar, a political scientist at Rutgers University Camden who studies gender and politics. But it's also an actual numbers issue because men are just a smaller proportion of the Democratic electorate. You need to do well among women in order to win the nomination. It's hard to pin down a single reason why men seem to be more attracted to Sanders' candidacy than women. There isn't really evidence, for example, that Sanders is especially likely to attract supporters who display hostile feelings toward women. In a recent analysis, researchers for Data for Progress did find that gender bias kept some voters from supporting Elizabeth Warren, but Sanders' supporters didn't hold more sexist views than Biden's. But there is evidence, according to an analysis by Dan Cassino, a political science professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University, that while support for Biden increases among voters with more sexist views, those with the most sexist views were disproportionately likely to favor Sanders. And this perhaps explains why Bernie Sanders just never did it for me. And so I don't know, like maybe I just sense that there was, a big part of the reason, and I remember this, was like I specifically didn't like the way that Bernie Sanders spoke to Hillary Clinton. And I know we can say it's because she's a criminal, whatever. Well, he's talking to many criminals in his career in politics. And in my opinion, he spoke to Hillary Clinton in a way that even if you're saying many people in politics are criminals, that was different from the way he spoke to other criminals. So I will say that. And sexism was higher in general among men. Educated Democrats who are quite sexist are disproportionately likely to be Sanders supporters, said Cassino. To be clear, there aren't a lot of those people in the Democratic Party, but because of their education and social capital, they're probably more inclined to tell people about their views and express them online. This doesn't explain all of Sanders' struggles with women, but his lopsided support among this group provides a window into some of the divisions that are roiling the Democratic primary electorate this year. Particularly the limits of Sanders' lefty anti-establishment message and the aggression of his supporters at a moment when many Democratic voters are laser-focused on finding a candidate who can beat Trump. At a Biden rally in Detroit last week, Mary McKenney, 69, said that she hadn't made up her mind about which candidate to support until the race narrowed to Biden and Sanders. Then she said her choice became very clear. It's not even that I don't like Bernie's ideas. I just think they can't happen, she said. And I think that's comes with age. The older you get, the less hope you have for change most times because life is fucking punched you in the face. And I think if he's the nominee, there will just be more fighting and conflict. We need someone who can bring Democrats together. Views like McKenney's aren't universal among Democratic women. Plenty of women are enthusiastic about Sanders, including McKenney's daughter, Carrie, 43, who was standing next to her at the rally. But older women like McKenney make up a much bigger share of the Democratic electorate, which makes them a disproportionately important group. So far, women over the age of 45 have made up 38% of Democratic primary voters, while women under the age of 45 only made up 19%. And the age gap that has emerged across the primary is almost certainly shaping women's support for Sanders, too. Older women tend to be more moderate than younger women, which means they may be less likely to see Sanders' calls to upend the status quo as feasible or appealing. But generational fissures aren't the whole story. Women of all ages told us they liked Sanders' ideas, but found aspects of his candidacy alienating. I don't have the same aversion to the DNC and the Democratic establishment that a lot of Bernie supporters seem to have, said Tiffany Keene Schaefer, 31, who lives in Chicago and volunteered for Warren, but is now undecided about who she'll support. Schaefer told me she's disturbed by some of the criticism Sanders' allies levied against Warren for not endorsing Sanders after she dropped out. Yeah, they were sexist. Right now, it feels like I am getting blasted every single day on social media about why Warren isn't doing enough to help Sanders. That and also maybe Elizabeth Warren has feelings about Bernie Sanders and by not voicing them, that's actually how she was helping them, because maybe she has a personal experience with him and doesn't fucking like the guy. And so by her not saying anything, that's actually the most helpful she can be and remained ethically in tune with herself. We don't know the full story. That antagonism makes Schaefer feel uncomfortable about the prospect of supporting Sanders, even though she's closer to him on the issues than to Biden. One of the central messages of Sanders' campaign is the need to take on the political establishment, including the party whose nomination he is seeking. On the day before he won the Nevada caucuses, Sanders tweeted, "I've got news for the Republican establishment. I've got news for the Democratic establishment. They can't stop us." That kind of message obviously appeals to people who are disaffected with the Democratic Party, but to people who don't have a problem with the party, it can seem like an unnecessary risk. And we know from so many things, from the way women drive, from the way they bet, from the way they invest, women are less likely to take a risk. And that's a whole other exploration. Mostly, politically, I would guess it's because we often have more on the line. There's more of a chance of things not going okay for us historically, whereas men, especially white affluent men, are, no matter what happens, are usually going to be okay. I understand why the young people love Sanders. Student debt, it's a real problem, said Grace Andrews, 79, who was waiting outside the Biden rally in Detroit with her grandson. I just have a concern that he is not willing to make the compromises that are necessary in our political system or work with people in the party who may not share his views. Women are especially likely to say that being a Democrat is an important part of who they are. According to our analysis of Democracy Fund and UCLA Nationscape survey of likely primary voters administered from February 20th to February 26th, 63% of Democratic women say that their party affiliation is somewhat or very important to their identity, compared to 58% of Democratic men. That's not an enormous difference, but it is statistically significant. It also lines up with other research that finds partisanship functions as a more important social identity for women than it does for men. Women over the age of 45 are especially likely, 67%, to say being a Democrat is an important part of their identity. Of course, not all women are turned off by the idea of radical changes to the system, including radical change to their own party. It just feels like the Democratic Party has forgotten what it means to be the party of the working class. So again, this is 5 years ago. We're having the same conversations that we're having now, but we're actually seeing progress, says Diana Post, 30, who lives in Detroit, and said she was torn between Warren and Sanders until Warren dropped out of the race. She now describes herself as a big Sanders fan. We need someone more radical than what the establishment is putting forward, a candidate who can shake things up. Over the course of the primary, voters have been asked if they would prefer a candidate who agrees with them on the issues or a candidate who can beat Trump. According to the exit polls so far, women are likelier to be in the latter category. 65% of women say they would prefer a candidate who can defeat Trump, compared to 59% of men. That isn't an overwhelming gap, to be sure, but it's still noteworthy given that women make up a disproportionate share of the Democratic electorate. And in the primaries so far, voters who prioritize a candidate who can defeat Trump are disproportionately likely to support Biden. That was where Ruth Vale, 77, said she had landed. She was standing on the University of Michigan quad, waiting with her 15-year-old grandson, Leo, to hear Sanders speak. But even though she was curious to hear what Sanders had to say, she said she'd probably be voting for Biden. I think, unfortunately, it's just going to be very easy to paint Sanders as an extremist, someone who's a very scary person who wants to change everything, she said. And I really just want a president who won't keep me up at night thinking about what he's going to do next. And that certainly is what Biden gave us for the most part. Kind of just like not newsworthy stuff, thinking about who he's going to appoint to the Supreme Court. The most important thing to me in this election is just ensuring that Donald Trump is no longer our president. And we got that, albeit only for 4 years. So yeah, that's my thoughts on all that. My enemy of the state this week is it's two people. They're kind of like, working together. Is all these politicians, again, most of whom don't even live in New York City or have really any relationship with New York City, who are posting Islamophobic things post Zohran's win. Like, what? I just don't understand. So even if you're worried about his anti-Semitism, or supposed anti-Semitism, your response to anti-Semitism is Islamophobia. Make it make sense. Please make it make sense. Posting pictures of like that 9/11 is going to happen again. Like, literally stop. Please. This is so bad. And then, and then the New York Times, who just keeps being the New York. They should call themselves the New York not in touch with the Times, doesn't have a pulse of the Times.
Enemy of the state.
Not only for their just, again, like I admire saying what you really think, even if I don't believe in it. And New York Times is like backhanded anti-endorsement of Zohran, which then became a backhanded endorsement of Cuomo. I have absolutely no respect for. And then on top of it, they wrote this article about Andrew Schultz, who, again, like very much personally, but I think it's a wild statement to say he's the most important political journalist. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's an interview, and I think when you read interview style articles, it's really annoying. But they literally, this like 2 days ago, they printed this article that said Andrew Schultz, podcast bro, might be America's foremost political journalist. That's an article that you felt good about, guys. That's an article you felt that was good in a time when we have acknowledged in numbers that podcasting and male comedians are backing and part of the reason that people are moving rightward, especially young men. You thought this was a good. Oh my God, that was so scary. I didn't realize this was like a motion thing, and Andrew Schultz just started moving in front of me. I thought it was a still picture. You thought that was a good move. I just think that's very weird. That's very weird. And I certainly don't think their response is like silencing Andrew Schultz. Again, I think that he obviously has a following for a reason. And he is a very hard worker, and again has always been very kind and supportive of me and all my work and of numerous women in comedy's work. That being said, there needs to be a response, and I mean the response does need to be a female response, and so especially if you're a woman listening, but also if you're a man listening, it's fine to take in all these male podcasters. But also make sure that you're, if you are, especially these lefty guys who say that they care so much about women and they're male feminists, like, okay, you can say all that, but are you regularly listening to the opinions of women? Obviously, if you're listening to this show, you are. But like, are your friends who claim to be feminists? Because it's hard to be a feminist, in theory, if you're never listening to the views of women. And your wife or your girlfriend does not count as the sole voice of that. It doesn't. I'm sorry. Your mom, your sister, and your girlfriend do not count in that. I am talking about listening to, if you are someone who takes in regularly the opinions of men through parasocial relationships, are you also doing the same for at least one female broadcaster? Are you? Because then you might want to not call yourself a feminist. And say what you want about Mike Harrington behind the booth, but he was an avid Guys We Fucked fan for many years before I even ended up working with him. So, he actually was taking that in. Another funny thing that happened is I made the news yet again this week, and through my comedy. So you guys might have seen I have an interaction from a couple of days before the primary, or maybe it was like a week before the primary, where I was working out some new material about running for mayor at New York Comedy Club. Shout out. I love New York Comedy Club. Definitely, patronize them if you're visiting New York City. That club has been so good to me. So supportive. Just love them so much. But they, so I posted the clip online. It's pinned to the top of my Instagram at Philanthropy Gal if you want to go watch it. But I was just working out material, and part of my, bit was about how Andrew Cuomo sucks. And then these two women started booing from the back. I said Andrew Cuomo, sexually assaulted 13 women. And I added an asterisk when I posted it online because it was assault/misconduct/harassment. But he did sexually assault some of the women. And they start booing, first of all. And it's like, if you're a woman and you're booing when I'm talking about, a man victimizing other women, that's crazy. And then I guess there was this British journalist from the Times there, and she wrote this article called "A New York Comedy Club Tells You a Lot About the City," in which she just gave away half of my joke, which annoyed me because she did not run this by me. And that's my intellectual property. So kind of fuck you. And then she also said that I was wearing leopard print leggings, which really set me up a wall because I was wearing tiger print sweatpants that were very high end, the most expensive sweatpants I've ever bought in my entire life. They were a present that I bought for me and Chloe LeBranch for the Eye of the Tiger tour so that we could match while we were on airplanes. And that also pissed me off. And I don't really know what the point of this was. And then she also points out in the article, which I didn't even notice, that these women began filming me doing my set. So I guess watch out for some weird gotcha moment that's not going to happen when they post this online. But anyway, it was just, all this to say my hatred of Andrew Cuomo made it all the way to London. So that was a fun thing that happened this week. Let's see. Okay, we spent a lot of time on this other stuff. So I want to see some of these things. So let's go to the WACO mailbag real quick. I got a lot of messages this week, and we're not going to get to all of them, but thank you for emailing them especially about municipal politics. A WACO named Austin emailed me, and he pointed out this article from Politico because he said he's both a fan of Hassan Piker, the H3 podcast, and me. And he said, this article says, critics say Zohran Mamdani is anti-Semitic. He said he's holding Israel accountable. And it goes through the article makes a bunch of different points. It's very long. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The point one that they make is that he condemned Israel after the October 7th attacks, which, left a bad taste in people's mouths. Point two is that he has defended the phrase globalize the intifada, which that's, I definitely take issue with that. Three, his support for boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, from the financial relationship with Israel, whatever. I don't care about that. And then four, refusing to disavow controversial streamer Hassan Piker, who has called Jews inbred after appearing on his show. And as I talked about, I definitely think that Hassan Piker, so it's, even if Zohran himself has not been outwardly anti-Semitic, he's certainly, broken bread with people who are outwardly anti-Semitic for all intents and purposes. I don't know how I feel about that because, am I friends or friendly with some people who certainly have some, views that I take issue with? Yes. And I just think it's weird to link someone like that to your political campaign. But, obviously his strategy here was he needed people with reach. And obviously that strategy worked. And then point 5, he did not sign a resolution recognizing the Holocaust. 6, Not on Our Dime Act. Mamdani is the prime sponsor of the Not on Our Dime Act, which would effectively ban Israeli charities from supporting the Israeli military or Israeli settlement activity. The legislation's stated purpose is to pressure Israel to end settlements and follow international law. Even that didn't bother me terribly. Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, my buddy who's been blocking Bill A-101. I hope you're having a bad summer, who usually abstains from commenting on individual members' legislation before it's discussed in conference, gave a rare rebuke of the bill. So I guess he had time for that. 7, led Israeli academic boycotts in college. Again, when he's in college, I do think that's his own time and he can be a part of whatever he wants to be a part of. He's rejected claims of anti-Semitism and point 9, further condemnation of Israel following October 7th. Some people felt that was rubbing salt in a wound. Point 10, criticism of lawmakers attending Israel Day parade, opposition to Israeli independence resolution. I also thought, I just thought the whole Israel Day parade was with all the death in Gaza, maybe just wasn't the time for it. but whatever. Okay. So thank you for emailing me that. I do now want to move on to, I had this on the roster for the week, but also WACO Elise messaged us something. I did change the article to something shorter. The Kat Cammack pregnancy debacle. Of course, Republicans like to make laws except for when it directly affects them. So that's fun. This is from...
I sent you this one too.
Oh, sorry. And then also Mike sent it to me. I just knew about it.
No, I was hyped on this one. This one gets me. I threw this in Fox News Mom's face this week. This was a fun one.
Oh, in your mom's face? Okay.
So, yeah, we were going back and forth about, different things. And I was like, I don't know. We were talking about Iran. And she was like, yeah, barbarism. And I was like, it would be barbaric if you kept a woman on life support to deliver a 1 pound, 1 ounce baby. And
Absolutely.
She was like, they did that? I was like, yo, it's wild.
How did someone who takes, I guess, because when you only consume, and that right there is a great, not to put your mom on the spot, but it's that I think so many people only consume from one news source. And that's, why she wouldn't know about a largely talked about story like that. And so I do, maybe with parents, Fox News parents, I think maybe, don't send them the New York Times or something that they're going to have an immediate aversion to. Start slow and just send them something that is still right leaning, but is a little less psychotic, like The Hill, I think because they do have, a little bit more even-keeled coverage, but still that conservative, flair that perhaps your parents are looking for. So, a lot of people are like, wait, what do I do about my conservative parents? The move, you don't go from Fox to Vox. You go from Fox to The Hill and you make baby steps. Rome wasn't built in a day. So and, unfortunately, and this is not for all older people, but for many older people, it is that you can't teach an old dog new tricks thing. And the older you are, most likely the more set in your ways you are. And that's just kind of how life is. And we don't know how we're going to be as we age. And we can hope to be people who are still malleable in good ways, not bad ways, like you're getting into a cult. But, I guess we shall see. So this is Republican says abortion law fear delayed her care for ectopic pregnancy from Newsweek. A Florida Republican is blaming fear-mongering from abortion rights groups about the state's abortion law for doctors hesitating to treat her ectopic pregnancy last year. So she's literally blaming the left for shit the right did. And that's why everyone was so angry at her. Representative... on a
bill she voted on.
Mm-hmm. Representative Kate... do you know how to say it? Cammack? Do we know?
Isn't K-A-T Kat?
Yeah, no, I said Kat.
Oh, okay.
Kat, I'm saying her last name. Is it Cammack or Cammack. I don't know. Kat Cammack sounds more fun, so we'll do that.
Yeah.
Representative Kat Cammack went to the emergency room in May 2024 and needed a shot of methotrexate to help expel her ectopic pregnancy. Though doctors estimated she was just 5 weeks pregnant, there was no heartbeat and her life was at risk. Cammack told the Wall Street Journal that staff had resisted giving her the drug because they were worried about losing their license or going to jail after Florida's near-total abortion ban took effect. Hours later, doctors agreed to give her the drug, she told the newspaper. Newsweek has contacted Cammack's office and abortion rights groups for comment via email. The context. Florida's ban took effect on May 1st, 2024. Isn't timing a bitch? That's really funny. That's like a little ha-ha from God. Making abortions illegal after 6 weeks with narrow exceptions. The penalties for those who violate the ban are steep, punishable by up to 5 years in prison, fines of up to $5,000, and loss of medical licenses. The law did not ban treatment of ectopic pregnancies, which occur when a fetus implants outside of the uterus and has no room to grow. If not treated, such pregnancies can rupture, causing organ damage, hemorrhaging, or even death. A report from the nonprofit Physicians for Human Rights in September 2024 said the ban created an unworkable legal landscape and that doctors had reported that ER staff were afraid to provide methotrexate to patients as it was an abortive agent. The Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration then issued guidance to address what it called misinformation about the state's abortion law, stating that abortion is permissible at any state of pregnancy in Florida to save the life and health of the mother, including in cases of ectopic or molar pregnancies and when there is premature rupture of membranes. What to know? Cammack, an abortion opponent who co-chairs of the House Pro-Life Caucus, supports exceptions for reported cases of rape and incest in the first trimester and in cases in which the mother's life is at risk, the Journal reported. She told the newspaper that she did not blame the Florida law for what she experienced. Rather, she laid the blame on messaging from abortion rights advocates, which she said made hospital staff afraid of giving drugs even in circumstances where it was legal. Quote, "It was absolute fear-mongering at its worst," Cammack, who is pregnant again, said. But she added that she knows that abortion rights advocates may view her experience differently. There will be some comments like, well, thank God we have abortion services, even though what I went through wasn't an abortion, she said. Molly Duane, senior attorney at the Center for Reproductive Rights, told the Wall Street Journal that although Florida regulators say ectopic pregnancies are exempt from restrictions, the law does not define ectopic pregnancy, and it can be difficult for doctors to tell where an embryo has implanted. She said, blaming medical professionals echoes the playbook of anti-abortion extremists that for decades have been blaming and villainizing doctors. Allison Haddock, the president of the American College of Emergency Physicians, told the Journal that it is common for doctors in states that have restriction access to abortion to be concerned about whether their clinical judgment will stand should there be any prosecution. What's next? Cammack, who is expecting her first child in August, said she hoped sharing her story helps those on opposing sides find common ground. Why? By being a cunt to the left who wants you to have autonomy over your own body? Kat? I would stand with any woman, Republican or Democrat, and fight for them to be able to get care in a situation where they are experiencing a miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy, she said. Thoughts, Mike, since this is your passion story of the week?
Yeah, I mean, anything, any kind of silliness like that just really makes me happy when legislators need to face the brunt of their dealings in Congress. It just makes me really happy. I mean, unfortunately, if what this woman is saying is true, and it's like there was never that provision in case, and that left people, the doctors to be hesitant, you can see how your work is directly affecting this, and the fact you're trying to put it onto fear-mongering is insane to me. But it honestly might be right. You know what I mean? Because it's like how many different articles did we read right after the Roe v. Wade bill was passed, where it was like all these hypotheticals where something like this might come up and it might be an issue. And it's like, if doctors are hesitating because they don't know the law and the only thing they've read is NBC News telling them they might go to jail for something like this, I can understand holding the needle, especially when you're operating on someone who signed it into law.
Right. Well, I mean, that's, that this is, anti-choice 101, where you make things so vague that, no one's going to maybe say, or that not enough people are going to say no to it so it can slide by and pass and become law. But also, when push comes to shove and you have to take it to court, there's enough wiggle room there to successfully prosecute people. Like, that is anti-choice 101. So, anyone who's been in the abortion space for a long time has seen that happen time and time again. All right. So thanks for sending that in. Also, okay. So someone did send me an article about Bonnie Blue. I didn't know. Did we talk about her last week? I've been reading a lot. I don't know. I think I shared some of this last week about like the human animal petting zoo, right? I talked about that on here.
I don't remember. You might be thinking of guys. I would remember that.
Oh, or maybe I did it when you were out and we had
maybe
another engineer, but
because I remember sending you the article the day it happened because Lisa Ann was celebrating it pretty heavily, and so it made it into my timeline.
Wait, what part of it was Lisa Ann celebrating?
Her being banned. She's very against the stunts Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips have been doing. She's like, it's bad for the entire industry. It's bad for all of us. You're making us all look bad. Like.
Right.
It's a good move by OnlyFans to put a stop to this dangerous practice.
Right. So I definitely talked about this then. And I can't remember which show because I do remember talking about it. Again, it's hard, but I mean. Yeah, because it was from the New Feminist, which is a UK publication, and this is Bonnie Blue, the Bop House, and the lucrative business of infantilization. And so it says, as Bop House alumni like Julia Filippo, I don't even know who that is. Fine, I know who Bonnie Blue is though.
I know who she is because of this video.
Oh, find viral fame through childlike aesthetics and barely legal branding. So I was talking. This is about infantilization. I previously talked about Bonnie Blue because of her human petting zoo antics.
That's what got her banned. But this is
and this is and Bonnie Blue is also the one who had sex with 1,000 people in one day.
She claims. That video was never.
Well,
released
and what it really is, what it really is 1,000 people, inserted their dick after working with a fluffer into her vagina and then left the room. So, I mean, is that, I guess it's 1,000 insertions.
Well, the Lily Phillips one was 100 guys in a day, and that was like filmed. You know what I mean? That was videoed throughout.
So, but it was Bonnie Blue who tried to do 1,000, or am I conflating the two?
Yeah. So Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue had talked about doing 100 together.
Okay.
I don't know what happened, but Lily Phillips went ahead and did the stunt herself. So Bonnie Blue, in retaliation, claims to have done 1,000 in a day.
Oh, it's good. It's good to retaliate with your vagina.
Yeah.
So
she wants to build an H bomb. We'll build a nuke, a fission bomb.
Oh my God. And bop is just slang for adult actor, I believe, right? I don't know.
I mean, bop is a slut.
Yeah, but
Bop House is like a content creator house of these kind of OnlyFans chicks.
But I follow some sex workers who refer to themselves as bop. So it's not always. I guess when you talk, you can use it on yourself without being derogatory, like taking the power. The same way as you can self-refer as a slut.
Yeah, I mean,
guys we fucked, the anti-slut shaming podcast.
15 years ago it was slut. 10 years ago it was thought. Now it's bop.
Now it's bop, now it's mattress actress. As Bop House alumni like Julia Filippo find viral fame through childlike aesthetics and barely legal branding, and creators like Bonnie Blue build careers around mentoring the naive, we're forced to ask, when does content creation cross the line into normalizing infantilization? Well, this is an interesting conversation. Again, I do think it's more of a guys we fuck conversation, but it was sent here. So it's an interesting conversation because, so many things that we've gotten away with, including or that we shun in mainstream society, including racism, still are prominent in sexual content. There are still categories on Pornhub where it is allowable to fetishize people by race, by disability, by weight, by trans versus cis. Like these things, it's so interesting because, you know, sexuality is often the most animalistic or primal part of ourselves. And even though we do away with things in mainstream society, conversation, writing, they often do still remain when you look into the sex space. So I think infantilization also falls under that category. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying this is not the only thing that we have decided is perhaps morally reprehensible in mainstream, but still exists in the sex world, right? Because it's still making money, basically.
Yeah, but it's whitewashed enough, like in this Bonnie Blue clip that they're showing here, where it's like that's 9 million views on TikTok. You're not getting that from like, you know, a disabled porn clip. You know what I'm saying? Like
So what's your argument here? What's your argument?
Just that it's like, you know, yes, I think anything should go on Pornhub. You know what I mean? But this is taking the aesthetic off of Pornhub and bringing it into TikTok, which is a very young space.
Right. So and I'm also surprised then that has it been removed from TikTok?
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, I can play you the clip. There's no nudity. There's nothing where it's like.
Yeah, but they're so crazy on TikTok. They take everything down.
I mean, this is.
So it's interesting what you can get through.
So it's literally just.
Are we going to get knocked off YouTube for playing this? Okay.
She's sitting on a bed, biting her lip, and it's a soundbite that says, "I think you know where this is going," and it's all dudes in masks surrounding them, and it's like, you know, Bonnie is dressed age appropriate. You know, the girl, her natural aesthetic or the aesthetic of the character she plays when she's doing adult films is a, you know, young girl. So having that surrounded by that many dudes, it's like, I don't know.
This doesn't even look that young to me though. Like she doesn't look. It's not. She's not on like a little girl's like dress or something like Lolita.
I mean, she's dressed like a 12-year-old.
Maybe I didn't watch this whole thing yet. Maybe it didn't, because I kind of didn't want to watch it at all. But here we are. The one with the ponytail is dressed?
The pigtails.
Yeah, I mean, wearing pigtails. Is that a 12-year-old? That to me looks like an adult outfit. I don't see how that's a 12-year-old's outfit. It really doesn't. I mean, to me, the video, which was only seen a few seconds long, showed Bonnie and Julia on a bed surrounded by masked men, lip syncing to the soundbite. I think you know where this is about to go. At the time of writing, the clip has nearly 9 million views. Now it has 23.1 million. At least 5 of them mine as I scrolled through the comment section. The responses were a mix of approvals and disapprovals, mainly from religious individuals and women, many of whom pointed out Julia's youthful appearance, particularly referencing her pigtail hairstyle. I mean, wearing pigtails that's a tale as old as time, you know, when it comes to sexuality or sexual things or wearing a cheerleader's outfit. Again, not saying I love it. It's not my thing, but it is, you know, old. One comment captured my attention. "You're such a great teacher, Bonnie." You know, that forced me to research further into the other videos promoting the full video on Bonnie's page. There are many where Bonnie insists she wants to be Julia's teacher, reminding viewers how much she loves barely legal virgins. I mean, yeah, barely legal is like a top section on like every porn site. Despite
but that was also one of her like stunts for notoriety, was like, I'm gonna take a bunch of like 18-year-old boys' virginity.
Right. Okay. I mean, despite there being only 3 years between their ages, some clips show the pigtail Julia being carried to the bed by at least 10 masked men, according to my count. All right. So this is kind of, you know, I don't know. These women have, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. These women have the agency, however, to create. Okay, so what alarmed me about seeing this video, this is the writer, was that it was not happening in private or fringe spaces, but algorithmically pushed to millions, including underage TikTok users. A 2024 study by Pew Research Center found out that out of 1,500 teen surveys, 68% said they are active TikTok users. For the young girls watching, the repeated message that vulnerability, passivity, and youth are the most valuable forms of femininity undermines decades worth of feminist work that sought to redefine female sexuality into agency and consent rather than submission and compliance. Well, I agree with that. That's a heavy sentiment to put on people where, in a space when sex work is always going to exist. And, at the end of the day, as we learned from Zohran Mamdani's, campaign, making money or having a lower cost of living is like the number one issue, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, for pretty much anyone. The effect of creators commodifying these dynamics, even satirically or strategically, serve to reinforce the idea that desirability depends on how childlike and controllable a woman can appear. I hear what they're saying. That being said, I think the work of feminism cannot be diminished with one TikTok video, and that if it can be that easily diminished in someone's mind, then they don't have like the structure or support system around them, which I know many young individuals don't, but we just have to make sure, especially as women or as girl dads, that we are giving, the women, especially the young women in our lives, many instances and examples of femininity, and not conflating that with male desire or like this capitalization of our sexuality. I think that's really, it takes a village, everyone. These women have the agency, however, to create successful brands for themselves and profit off public image, which is no mean feat. They are only afforded this choice also thanks to a long history of women who risked a lot for bodily autonomy to be possible. I can't help but feel Julia's brand centering around performing less sexual knowledge, positioning herself as not only younger but more vulnerable, is a step backwards, imitating less agency while only being able to do so because of generations of work by women is slightly ironic and feels regressive. But also, I would say, this is still a kink, and a lot of times you don't control what your kink is. For many women, I mean, if we're talking about sub-dom, this is like classic. Like, many women still do enjoy being submissive in the bedroom and enjoy that, and enjoy even, as far as humiliation. Again, please, if you're not, don't listen to Guys We Fucked and don't fully understand what I'm talking about. Don't just go and like humiliate someone in the bedroom. They have to like that as their kink. Just as much as many men hire a dominatrix because they like to be the sub, or because they like to be humiliated, or they like to be bossed around. The article goes on to say, while many would see profiting off a system that has existed for millennia and will continue for another as empowering, sexualized infantilism harms the women who aren't on top of that pedophilic system but trapped beneath it, which, let's face it, is the majority of us. I can't help but feel conflicted. As someone who supports sex workers' rights and autonomy, I also feel fatigued watching the normalization of childlike imagery as a marketing strategy. It also makes me sad to see them contorting themselves into the most clickable form of womanhood instead of creating content perhaps more authentic to them. I agree. That bothers me too, but I do still feel like it's a kind of their choice. And, so if you're looking at sex work as just like another art form, and it's because I'm like, it's hard to kind of say what sex work is. Is it a service? Is it an art form? Is it somewhere in the middle? Maybe that's where I would land. But it's like, do we hold, so many people don't hold film directors, especially male film directors, to the same standards when it comes to like the ethics of what they're putting out into the world. And I kind of feel the same way about sex work. I mean, if we're talking about ethical creation, my stance, I feel like Saw is an unethical film franchise. Have I still seen everyone? Yes. So I'm part of the problem. But in many ways, I feel it's like as unethical as maybe this infantilization fantasy. As I don't know. Again, this is like a very long form conversation. But, thank you for bringing that to the table. I do think that's very interesting. That was from WACO Emma. I have a quick Cuties Corner before we wrap up the show with our main story, which is, of course, about Iran. I wanted to put in some good news. The Zohran win, in my opinion, was good news, and also this is good news. So this is from Gothamist, and this is my Cuties Corner for this week. Brooklyn judge rules pet dogs are family members. Do you have the drop, or is it not on here? I know people love that song, and I know you worked hard on it with Alex, I believe, right? Well, I'll read it, and you interrupt me when you need to. Pet dogs aren't just property, they're family, a Brooklyn judge ruled this week. The decision centers on a dachshund named Duke, who was hit by a car and killed 2 years ago in Mill Basin on July 4th. Oh, rest in peace, Duke. Justice Aaron Maslow ruled Duke's connection with his human family was so deep that they should be eligible for a type of compensation previously limited to people who witness a human family member being injured or killed. Legal experts say the decision could pave the way for more New Yorkers to seek compensation by claiming their pet dogs as family members, not just property, when they are hurt or killed. And while I feel like monetary compensation is lovely, I think I want to see more like legal responsibility for people who harm animals. Like even if this was an accident, for the person who did it. The legal status of animals is currently undergoing a really important transformation, and this is part of a larger shift in how the law sees and treats animals, said Christopher Berry, executive director of the Non-Human Rights Project. We're moving from an outdated view of animals as mere things to recognizing them as individuals who matter. According to the decision, Nan DeBlas was walking her son's 4-year-old dog, Duke, when he was hit. She said she remembers looking both ways before crossing East 64th Street along Strickland Avenue, but before she reached the other side of the intersection, she said in court papers, a driver made a left turn without stopping at the stop sign or using a turn signal and hit Duke. DeBlas and her son, Trevor DeBlas, sued the driver, Mitchell Hill. Their lawsuit asks Mitchell to pay them for driving negligently, which they said caused the dachshund's death, endangered Nan DeBlas, and caused the family mental distress. Maslow ruled the case can move forward to a trial, and the DeBlases can seek compensation for their loss. So, again, we don't have to read the whole thing, but like this, I 100% agree with this. Like, this is mental distress. There's so much animal endangerment that goes on. And again, like in a progressive city like New York City, this happens all the time. And animals are not possessions. Like they're living things. They're not possessions. So I love to see this, and that is some positive news, I think, for animals. And let's close up the show with our main story about Iran right now. I have something from the Free Press and then something from the Middle East Eye. Obviously, we'll see. The Free Press does tend to be pretty Jewish. It's interesting because I wanted to go to a watch party last night for the results of the mayoral primary, and I subscribe to the Free Press. A lot of times I don't agree with their takes, but I think their takes are interesting, and they have interesting reporting, and they talk about different things, and they talk about things in a different way. And so I was invited as a subscriber to go to the event, and I checked it out. And it was definitely, they had some of the journalists who write for the Free Press doing live commentary, like podcast style, over the results, and it was definitely too conservative for me. It wasn't like super conservative, but it was too conservative for me. But it was interesting, and I just I don't want like Israel and Palestine to become like the main issue of municipal politics, and more so, it alarms me that it's turning many Jews conservative, because that's just like historically not who the Jewish people are. The Jewish people are historically actually very liberal, and so that did bother me. Again, there was nothing like outright that was like I felt that was outrageous, but yeah, I don't know. It was just it was mostly young people. Mostly white, but I think they're Jewish, so that's different. As people as anti-Semites in the YouTube comments like to point out, I'm apparently not white enough to call myself white, but I'm also like if I don't call myself white, there's also a problem with that. So again, I'm part Jewish, so part of me is 100% white, no matter what you think Jews are. But keep those anti-Semitic comments coming. It's really helping. So this is from the MiddleEastEye.net. Trump promised not to go to war. His most ardent supporters want him to keep his word. The Make America Great Again branch of the Republican Party is mounting an anti-war campaign that aligns with the left, by Yasmin El Sabawi. And this is from June 18th. So this is like right after the initial, Iran thing. This war isn't about Iran's nuclear weapons for Israel. It's about one thing: regime change. Hear me now. This is not going to stop at some bombing campaigns around Iran's nuclear program. That's just the appetizer, not the entree. Does America really want to be Israel's dance partner to this siren song? If those words sound like they came from a progressive, Bernie Sanders aligned, anti-imperial voice, they did not. Those are the words of former Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of the most loyal supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump and his Make America Great Again movement since its inception. Gaetz, since resigning from the House of Representatives after a slew of ethics violations, now has his own show on the far-right TV channel One America Network. When you call someone a modern-day Hitler, it is a permission structure to kill them. Gaetz went on to say, after playing a clip of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling ABC News that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is a modern-day Hitler. Gaetz then went on to interview his former colleague, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, another vocal and often controversial America Firster. Matt, I see it just as you do, and you laid that out so well, she said. We've watched for decades propaganda news. I'll call out Fox News and the New York Post. They're known to be neoconservative network news. The American people have been brainwashed into believing that America has to engage in these foreign wars in order for us to survive, and it's absolutely not true. Green has been urging the Trump administration to stay out of Israel's attacks on Iran since they began last Friday. On Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump told senior aides he had approved plans to attack Iran, but had not yet given the final order to carry them out. And, you know, for those of you mostly on the left who are saying, like, you know, Trump needed to get the okay from Congress to do it, you know, to bomb Iran. I surmise this off the top of my head, but it has since been proven, like, under normal circumstances, yes. But what Trump is doing and what we've seen him do time and time again is kind of use these veto powers or special emergency, special circumstances laws that, you know, presidents haven't dared to use for years and years and years. He's using them all. So he's technically not like breaking the law. He's just using presidential power that has not been tested or used by any president in a long time. And that's what he did, you know, with Iran. Basically, I think it had to, like, you know, constitute some kind of a national emergency or something. And so just to clear that up, like, yes, what he did something that we would most likely see another president do? No. But does he technically, as the president, have the ability to do what he did without technically breaking the law? Yes, but you would, I guess, have to interpret that it was necessary, which is, again, vague and up for discussion. A new paradigm, the questions and posture that challenge the American establishment's penchant for war have not, in recent memory, been as organized, as targeted, or as influential as the voices of MAGA's most well-known cast of characters. That's a great way to describe them, too. Take Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News pundit who appeared on Steve Bannon's War Room show on YouTube earlier this week. Bannon himself is a former White House strategist from Trump's first term in office and remains one of the most influential people in the MAGA circuit. I grew up in a world that espoused violence. That's what the U.S. government does, Carlson told Bannon. If you think, and I said this to an Israeli official, if you think I'm anti-Israel, man, you have lost the plot, he said of the anti-war stance he's adopted. Let's have a rational conversation about what our aims are here, and maybe you can convince me that we need to support a regime change war in Iran. Tell me how that plays out in a country of 90 million people. Have you thought it through? Do you even care? And the answer is no, Carlson said. You may have a plan for regime change, it's fine, but you got to bring the American people on, Bannon agreed. As of Wednesday, that clip had some 7,000 views. Carlson then interviewed Bannon on his show on YouTube, and and the 1 hour and 18-minute conversation generated 1 million views in less than 24 hours. Bannon outlined the 3 pillars on which he says Trump was elected. Stop the forever wars, seal the border and deport the illegal aliens, the illegal invaders, and redo the commercial relationships in the world around trade deals. Reneging on one of them would potentially undo the others, Bannon said, with a stark warning. I'm a big supporter of Israel, yes, and I'm telling people, hey, if we get sucked into this war, which inexorably looks like it's going to happen on the combat side, it's going to thwart what we're doing with the most important thing, which is the deportation of the illegal alien invaders that are here. Again, this is all their language. I'm just reading quotes. If we don't do that, we don't have a country, he said, of Trump's plan to deport at least 1 million undocumented immigrants every year, as well as foreigners who may have civil or criminal violations. Bannon also cautioned that joining and expanding the war on Iran could mean the end of Israel because of the way these decisions have been made. Carlson, expressing remorse for supporting the invasion of Iraq in 2003, said optics and public opinion should be critical to guiding the White House's decisions. Abraham Lincoln told us, you know it's going to be good when Abraham Lincoln gets involved, what you need is popular opinion to have your back. And we don't do enough about educating the American people on what reality is, he said. Much like the allegation that Iraq had a weapon of mass destruction, Bannon said Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who was handpicked by Trump, confirmed to lawmakers in a public hearing in March that Iran was not assessed to be close to building a nuclear bomb. They don't have a program. They haven't had a program, Bannon emphasized. In a new interview with Texas Senator and longtime war hawk Ted Cruz posted on Wednesday on YouTube, Carlson repeatedly challenged him on Iran's population, its makeup, and precisely how the Bible says that Christians must support Israel, which Cruz cites as his reasoning, which is crazy. You shouldn't be bombing or not bombing people because of the Bible. I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things. Cruz, a Republican who did not support Trump until he became president in 2017, told Carlson on his show. Carlson asked him where in the Bible it said that, and Cruz said he doesn't remember. You don't have context for it. You don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean? We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel. Yeah, I would also like to see where that's cited. We are commanded to support Israel, Cruz responded, as the two continuously cut each other off. God is talking about the nation of Israel. What? Okay, does that even, how does that doesn't even, what doesn't even check out, like, on a timeline. Israel was founded in 1948, so how would the Bible be?
No, Israel's always been there. Just ask him.
What they're talking about, Israel in its current form.
Yeah, no, it's just a reformation of the same ancient Israel from the Bible. Same thing.
Okay, well, that was a little biased for a non-biased show. I see what you're saying, though.
That's the way it is.
That doesn't even make sense on a timeline.
I mean, Aaron Sorkin covered this in West Wing 20 years ago.
You have to stop referencing things I've never seen. Is that the current borders, the current leadership, Carlson asked? Yes, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation, Cruz said. The Iron Hawks in Congress, all of whom are also staunch supporters of Israel, have been lobbying the White House to join Israel's war. Many of them take cues from pro-Israel lobbying groups, which have also dispatched members of proxy think tanks like the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies to go on channels like Fox News and advocate for full U.S. military engagement. As the debate rages, Trump himself was on the defensive in an interview with The Atlantic. For those people who say they want peace, you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So for all of those wonderful people who don't want anything to do anything about Iran having a nuclear weapon, that's not peace, he said. Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. Very simple. Regardless, Israel or not Israel, Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb, he added. On Monday, he took aim directly at Carlson. I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen, Trump told reporters, implying that Carlson no longer had the viewership and reach he had as a mainstream media broadcaster. I mean, wilder by the moment. And as of Sunday, the U.S.
Trump on Tucker, by the way, he did it the same night as the Republican primary debates. and that got 10, I think it was 100 or something like that, times the viewership as the Republican debate. Like, he knows the numbers on Tucker.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and again, not to bring it back to Zohran, but I mean, I think like, what Trump succeeds at is like, he no matter what, he's always going to be like a person. Like, you can't take the entertainment business out of Trump, so he's going to know the numbers and he knows how to get eyes on him. And I think I think this is. I don't know if it's good, like it's good for politics, but it's good for the left competing with the right. I think what the left needs to do, and what Zohran Mamdani was able to do, is learn how to get eyes on him, get eyes on the left. And so, like, they do call the politics entertainment for ugly people. And I know Zoran's a hottie, boom body, but yeah, I mean, that is very interesting because they do seem more and more similar by the day. And as of Sunday, the U.S. was not operationally engaged in the war. Trump told ABC News, "We're not involved in it. It's possible we could get involved, but we are not at this moment involved," the president said. But that's not what Cruz appeared to let slip in his discussion with Carlson. Iran is trying to murder Donald Trump, Cruz said. "We're carrying out military strikes today." "You said Israel was?" Carlson asked. "I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them," Cruz responded. "Well, this is you breaking news here," Carlson responded, alluding to a White House spokesperson who denied U.S. operational involvement. Everyone in the White House right now needs to take a communications, like, couples course or something, because they are not communicating properly with each other. "We're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them," Cruz said. "You just said we were. We are supporting Israel," Cruz said. The U.S. president has been cryptic in his messaging on what course of action he will take next in Iran, giving mixed signals regarding being open to talks, but saying it's too late to talk, and then also saying that the U.S. may strike, but they may not. Trump's MAGA base, however, has not yet given up in trying to dissuade the American president from what they think will become another costly entanglement in the Middle East and a potential fracture in the Republican Party's voter base. And then, all right. Well, can you get into that WSJ article that's all the way at the bottom? Not the FP one. I'm going to get into the FP one on here. New window. Sorry, just getting through a lot of paywalls here, everybody. And then, so the counterpiece to that from the Free Press is Trump keeps his promise on Iran. The world is safer for it. And this is by the editors. The big read. President Trump promised he would never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Last night, with 7 B-2 bombers and a dozen 30,000-pound bombs, he made good on that vow. The world is better for it. Trump announced Saturday evening that the U.S. had completed a spectacularly successful strike on Iran's nuclear enrichment sites at Natanz, Esfahan, and Fordow. The last of those is a heavily fortified facility buried some 300 feet deep in a mountain in Iran's Qom province. Although Israel has bunker-busting bombs, none have the size and destructive power of the most advanced American bombs, with the capability of destroying or severely damaging the site. In a moment of political decisiveness and courage, Trump deployed those bombs despite strenuous objections from the restrainers in his administration and parts of the MAGA coalition. "There's no military that could have done what we did," Trump said during a brief speech to the nation Saturday night, which I did watch. He is correct, as Niall Ferguson and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant recently noted in these pages. Fordow was essentially impervious to assault. There was one bomb that could cut through its defenses, America's GBU-57A-B massive ordnance penetrator, and there was only one plane built to deliver that bomb, the American B-2 Spirit. With a single exertion of its unmatched military strength, Ferguson and Gallant wrote, "The United States can shorten the war, prevent wider escalation, and end the principal threat to Middle Eastern stability. It can also send a signal to those other authoritarian powers who have been Iran's enablers that American deterrence is back." That is exactly what this White House has done. It is impossible to know at this early stage whether the bombing strike completely destroyed their targets. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that the 3 sites that were targeted sustained severe damage and destruction. I read another article in the New York Times, saying that, they were originally assessing that this bombing set Iran's nuclear program back years, but in reality, it apparently only set their nuclear program back months. But an anonymous senior U.S. official told the New York Times that the most important of the three sites, Fordow, was not completely destroyed. In the hours since the American bombing campaign, Israel has continued to strike at Iranian missile and drone sites, while Iran has hit Israeli cities with missile attacks. Americans are skeptical of the U.S. involving itself in wars anywhere, let alone the Middle East, and for good reason. The memory of decades of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the 7,000 Americans and untold Mid-Easterners who died during those wars. But none of that should obscure the reality that Iran has been a menace to the region and to America for decades. It has the blood of so many Americans on its hands, from our GIs in Iraq and Afghanistan to our Marines in Lebanon to the attempted assassination of Trump himself, all while relentlessly pursuing nuclear arms. There is no question that the region and the free world are safer without a nuclear Iran and the inevitable arms race it would trigger as other volatile countries in the region raced to get their own nuclear arms. To us, preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon seems simply a matter of common sense, yet so many Democrats apparently find it impossible to praise this president. AOC, the best-known progressive in the House of Representatives, said that the strike against Iran was grounds for impeaching the president. The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers, Ocasio-Cortez wrote in a post on X. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries complained that Trump had failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military force and risks American entanglement in a potentially disastrous war in the Middle East. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer echoed Jeffries. We must enforce the War Powers Act, he said. Congressional authorization for a bombing run in the Mideast? Seriously? On X, Jamie Metzel, who had been a member of Bill Clinton's National Security Committee and by his own admission a vocal critic of most of Trump's policies, praised the president on Sunday for bold and courageous actions in support of America's core national interests as he took last night. But he was the exception among his tribe. To those criticizing the bombing of Iran's nuclear program, we must ask, is it really not possible to oppose Trump while also acknowledging that preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power is an unambiguously good thing? It is understandable that Democrats don't want the U.S. to become embroiled in another forever war in the Mideast. Most Republicans, whether MAGA or not, don't want that either. But this is not another Iraq or Afghanistan. There are no plans for American, or for that matter, even Israeli boots on the ground in Iran. The closest thing to ground forces is this air and intelligence war are the networks of agents deployed masterfully so far by Israel's Mossad. President Trump has always been clear that he has no interest in prolonged American intervention overseas. He has also said time and again that he would not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Consider how Russia's nuclear arsenal prevented the Biden administration from acting more decisively in the early stages of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, precisely for fear of a nuclear response. Imagine now Iran with the same implicit threat to fire a nuclear weapon against its enemies. Iran has been the nexus for terror for decades. A nuclear weapon would make them a true danger, not just to Israel, but to the entire world. It is our hope that Saturday's attack will have the effect of both freeing the U.S. from a prolonged foreign entanglement while quickly and decisively preventing the regime in Tehran from building this most horrifying of weapons. None of this is to say that there won't be negative repercussions from Saturday's attack. Iran has repeatedly shown a willingness to strike abroad since their 1979 revolution installed the Ayatollahs. Consequently, American, Israeli, and Jewish soft targets are in a state of heightened vigilance. In the meantime, Saudi Arabia has put its troops on maximum alert. Bahrain and Qatar have declared a state of emergency. Perhaps the most urgent concern is the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows. There are reports that Iran has already begun jamming navigation systems there, and on Sunday afternoon, the Iranian parliament voted in support of closing the strait entirely. Isolationists are already claiming that this risk means the strike was a mistake. We strongly disagree. Iran was already enriching enough uranium to fuel close to a dozen warheads. The civilized world could not allow the world's leading sponsor of terrorism to become a nuclear blackmailer. And it was obvious that there was no diplomatic solution to the problem. That has been clear ever since the Iran nuclear deal negotiated by the Obama administration that was supposed to prevent Iran from furthering its nuclear aims. It failed to do so. It was made clear again when Trump returned to office as he repeatedly called on Iran to negotiate a deal. Those calls fell on deaf ears. In April, the Trump administration gave Iran 60 days to come to a nuclear agreement. Again, there was no response. Even after Israel's devastating first week of strikes, the mullahs said no. Trump noted Saturday night that additional American attacks could begin if Tehran refuses to shut down its nuclear program completely.
Okay, hold on.
What?
Some of this is insane. Again, there was no response even after Israel's devastating first week of strikes. The guy who Trump was negotiating with got killed by Israel. What are we talking about?
I'm reading a point and counterpoint. It is our sincere hope that Iran's regime, and then can you summarize that WSJ to round us out? I don't know if you've read it or like.
I haven't. I have it up.
Because I mean, obviously, I think you know about that.
All right.
It is our sincere hope that Iran's regime understands the existential threat it faces and disarms. If not, they are the only ones to blame for any future violence. The theocracy in Iran has brutally subjugated its own people for nearly half a century now. They have exported violence across the Middle East and look to murder innocent people across the world. It is a terrorist regime that must not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. We can only hope that we have finally stopped them at the last hour. One final point. During Trump's first term, his critics often noted how lucky it was for the U.S. that he didn't face a serious foreign policy crisis. Their assumption is that he would be in over his head and act irrationally. Most recently, Wall Street coined the acronym TACO, Trump always chickens out. That's the opposite of what happened on Saturday night. No matter what you think of Trump's policies on immigration, tariffs, or anything else, there is only one adjective to describe his action in this crisis: presidential. Now, okay. So to me, that was basically Middle East, like pro-Middle East, perspective versus like pro-Israel perspective. Because like when you were talking about the free press editors, they do tend to be very pro-Israel. I know you and I are very much pacifists, and like I just don't know, or I don't really feel like Iran was this imminent threat, and to us in the way that they were saying. Your thoughts?
On what they were saying, I mean, my thoughts are there is absolutely no proof to me that Iran had amassed enough enriched uranium to develop 12 nuclear warheads. I think any intelligence that tells them that that is true would have come from the Mossad, which they were very clearly, number one-ing in that piece, because Mossad's never been wrong. Mossad's never had an intelligence mess up, except for the one day they took off was October 6th. 2023 to allow what happened the following day. They referenced it in one of the other articles. Our senior intelligence, the person in charge of directing the American defense system, told us that Iran is not close to getting this bomb. I have images of Bibi Netanyahu standing up in front of Congress with a Wile E. Coyote-style bomb diagram showing that we are there. Iran is 90% of the way to having a nuclear warhead, and that was from 2013. The boogeyman of Iran possibly getting nukes has been running literally since Jon Stewart was making jokes about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction. It feels like a very convenient way to dip our toe into the water of a Middle East conflict that is going to be detrimental to my daughter's generation.
Well, and so what do you think? Like, Trump did run, and I know one of the things you most liked about Trump is that he did run on being a no-war president. So why not? Like, why now do you think he's making moves to kind of make it so that we need to get involved in this?
Well, I mean,
just his relationship with Netanyahu, or like what's going on?
No, I mean,
is it real?
Yeah. Look, I mean, Tucker Carlson pressed Ted Cruz on it, right? But like the amount of money that he gets from AIPAC, the amount of money that Donald Trump gets from AIPAC, like you go down the list.
So again, it all goes back to money, as everything on the show ultimately does.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I called this out though from the jump. If you remember when we first.
Sorry, I felt like time.
I get it. We talked about it the moment they had brokered that initial. Remember the initial ceasefire Trump brokered in his first like week in office or something like that.
Right. I mean, I can't even keep track of the ceasefires at this point.
Right. So there was the ceasefire in Israel and Palestine, and
it's like a boyfriend saying, "I'm not going to cheat again." Like that's what the ceasefires feel like at this point.
The footnote of that first ceasefire, though, was as a result of Israel agreeing to ceasefire, the U.S. would be, the U.S. Based on the concessions they made for the quote-unquote ceasefire, the U.S. would also supply them with tons of missiles, to which I said, that is just them staging weapons for an eventual war in in Iran. And this was 6 months ago I made this call. And what was used in the bombings? When Trump was interviewed on the White House lawn, and I heard the president say, neither of them know what the fuck they're doing, which was an all-time quote for me. It was the American bombs that were sent there following that initial ceasefire that were dropped on Tehran. So it's like, you can say whatever you want about being an anti-war president, but if you are in the pocket of, Israel, the Mossad, whatever you want to call it, right? Whether it is money or it's something more nefarious, for whatever reason, it seems to be Israel says jump and we say how high. Right. I remember having this argument when the initial strike was launched by Israel, and my dad was saying, "Oh, Trump got the green light on this," and then they reached out to I think it was either Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, but they asked him like, "Hey, did Trump know about this?" And he said unequivocally, Israel moved unilaterally on this. And then when Trump was asked about it, he said, "Oh yeah, I gave the green light on it." It's like, it feels very much like things are being done. They're asking for permission. They're asking for forgiveness instead of permission. And we're being left to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we don't send in that plane strike to take out just the nuclear facilities and try to broker some kind of a peace out of this, it very much is just a war of aggression that Israel's starting, and we are beholden to back them on.
This is just so messy. And I just feel like every single thing, we've already seen it happen in the mayoral primary here in New York City. And I just feel like every political move, every political race from now, this is like the only thing that anyone is talking about is this, genocide, war, conflict, whatever we're calling it.
Well, I mean, we were this close this week. I mean, legitimately this close to World War III this weekend.
I know.
And we were getting closer and closer by the day. I mean, Kalshi, we were talking about it being a predictor for, this mayoral race. Once it flipped to Zohran being the favorite on Kalshi, I was like, yeah, this is pretty much a done deal in my mind.
That we're having World War III?
No. They have props up on Kalshi right now. You can bet on, will there be a nuclear explosion in 2025? It's only 3.5 to 1.
Okay, I'm so bad at it. What is it? Is that high likelihood of it? I don't know what this means.
Okay.
You're talking to me in betting terms. I don't gamble at all. All
right. Like, for instance, the Indiana Pacers to win the NBA Finals, which they went to a Game 7 on, came into that series at plus 600.
Right.
So they're saying it's nearly twice as likely there will be a nuclear explosion this year as it was that the Indiana Pacers, who got all the way to a Game 7, could win the NBA Finals.
Thank you. I understand that now. The only kind of, I guess I do understand basketball odds. Yeah, I mean, like, again, it takes a lot to even get me kind of scared about something politically. Like, I really just don't subscribe. Like, I do not get scared about really anything politically. As I mentioned last week, I do have like a bad feeling about the 4th of July. Like, I just feel like with the timing, with everything that's going on, being so close to the 4th of July, I just feel like, I don't have a good feeling about this. And so what, and can you summarize what this, Wall Street Journal article said about the ceasefire? I'm actually like not super up to, date with this, 'cause I was spending all my time this week on, municipal stuff.
Okay, so I took the entire article and I fed it into ChatGPT and I said, "Give this to me as you're a newscaster who has to deliver this in 70 seconds or less."
Okay.
So it's
Honestly, Mike, that was a really good idea, and I always forget that. I asked ChatGPT other kinds of questions, and I find it to be really helpful. I always forget that it can summarize, though.
Yeah, it's pretty good for that. So it says, "Good evening. A dramatic weekend unfolded in the Middle East as U.S. B-2 stealth bombers launched surprise strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, destroying key facilities at Fordow and Natanz. The move triggered a short but intense conflict involving Israel and Iran, but in just days later, an unexpected ceasefire was brokered. The turning point? Back-channel diplomacy. Despite fiery rhetoric, including an expletive-laced tirade from President Trump, Washington and Tehran communicated through Arab intermediaries, while Iran's limited missile strike on a U.S. base in Qatar appeared collaborated to avoid escalation. President Trump, bypassing traditional diplomatic channels, pressured Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to halt strikes, even threatening repercussions after a final exchange of attacks, including a deadly missile strike on Beersheba and Israeli strikes in Tehran. The fighting stopped. Trump declared victory on social media, calling it a success of overwhelming force and bold negotiation. Whether this truce holds and if Iran's nuclear ambitions can truly be curbed remains uncertain. From airstrikes to ceasefire in 72 hours, diplomacy, disruption, and detente, Trump style. Stay with us.
That was beautiful, Mike. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope that you've learned something. Certainly the end of a mini era with the mayoral primary, and I'm so interested and excited and nervous that New Yorkers, if we can come together and really back a candidate that will, handle municipal issues, that would be fucking fantastic. In the meantime, I want to give a shout out to our incredible dictator, Hannah Pendergrass. Remember, if you're in the Chicago area, you need your hair did, especially if you want color or extensions, you're going to head over to hannahpendergrass.com. And make an appointment, support a small woman-owned business, and then leave an amazing Google review talking about your incredible experience with Hannah Pendergrass. Beautiful hair on there. If I'm in Chicago, I'll say, hey, what's up? And shout out to my capitalist pigs and my cuties. Remember, if you want to join the Patreon and get one exclusive video news story every single week, you're going to go to patreon.com/withoutaCountry. You can subscribe for as little as $6 a month, and it helps to keep this show running. And I really appreciate everyone for being there. Of course, follow me on social media at Philanthropy Gal. Make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube to Without a Country, even if that's not where you consume the show. It just helps with visibility. Leave a comment, like it. A very sweet, loyal WACO was mad that everyone who watched it on YouTube wasn't giving it a like, because that helps push the algorithm. And indeed, interacting with anything online, social media or YouTube does help. So thank you for pointing that out. I'm not as frustrated, but I appreciate you being frustrated on my behalf. And Mike, do you have anything that you need to promote?
In case we don't get bombed to smithereens on July 4th weekend, July 5th, I'm going to be at Fifth Company Brewing with Brendan Sagalow. I know James Moss is going to be there. Ben Stabe's going to be there, and a whole host of other people. So come on down. Fifth Company Brewing. Get your tickets at fifthcompanybrewing.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Without a Country podcast. Make sure to do your critical thinking, do your research, vote, participate in municipal politics. The truth is in there, I promise. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.